Chapter 261 Meet Luffy. Daughter Island. The sky is clear, and the sapphire sky is full of white clouds. After a lively period of time, the residents of Daughter's Island gradually became silent. The marriage of Lord Snake Princess was not so dramatic. Inside the palace. In an empty hall. Liang was lying on the sofa, leaning against Hancock's cheek. The latter was blushing and wrapped his arms around Liang's shoulders, showing no sign of letting go. "How are you feeling?" Liang asked about Hancock's condition, his face puzzled. "It's almost healed." Hancock's voice was clear and crisp, and her complexion was obviously much better than when Liang first saw her. Unlike before, the blood all over her body was scalding hot. "This is surprising. Originally, I planned to use that method." Liang hooked Hancock's nose and smiled. "In what way?" Hancock's beautiful eyes flashed, his eyes fixed on Liang's eyes, and he asked. "Of course, it ate you." Liang showed a smile, approached Hancock's delicate face, and said. Immediately, Hancock's delicate face suddenly became rosy, and it was unbelievably beautiful. She hurriedly changed the subject. "The navy on the coast has been waiting for a long time. You say, should I go to Marinvando? It doesn't matter if you want to go or not. Even if you put aside the position of Chihuahai, I will be your support. No one can do anything to you in this sea." Liang rubbed Hancock's black hair, his eyes flashed, and he said with a smile, "Of course, besides me, I can do anything to you." After he finished speaking, his hands slid on Hancock's skin. Hancock blushed, hurriedly pushed Liang away, and ran away. She was barefoot, revealing the pure white instep. She took a pair of long legs that were as white as jade and quickly walked to the corner of the hall. Before leaving the hall, she looked back at Liang, smiled sweetly, her beautiful eyes curved into crescent moons, as beautiful as a woman walking out of a picture scroll. "I can't make you wish." Hancock jumped mischievously, stuck out his pink tongue, and said, "I'm going to find Verona and the others, you should be alone and alone." "Hancock, you are so cruel." Liang pretended to be heartbroken and said. "I won't be fooled again." Hancock snorted angrily and said. She was not only deceived by Liang like this once, but after being deceived, every time she was deceived by the opponent to break the last line of defense. Recalling the depressed expression on his face when the other party was blocked by her, the corner of Hancock's mouth twitched, revealing a beautiful smile. "Really, so sad." Liang clutched his chest and pretended to be sad. Although he knew it was fake, Hancock couldn't help but soften his heart for no reason. She waved her hand helplessly and said, okay, really, every time I see you like this, I feel distressed. It's strange. I know it's fake, but I can't help but feel distressed. Won't you come to comfort me?" Liang said with a smile on his face. Hancock returned to Liang, and after closing his eyes, he gave a reward and left quickly. When Liang opened his eyes, he could no longer see Hancock. He wiped the traces from the corners of his mouth, and his eyes slid a little tenderly. "What a lovely little girl." Liang stood up from the sofa and looked at the green woods outside the window with a smile. "Speaking of which, he has been on Daughter Island for so long, and he hasn't gone out to appreciate the outside environment properly. I happen to be free today, so I can go out and play." Chapter 261 Luffy. NLT, 47 and GT. I happen to be free today, so I can go out and play. As for the so-called navy waiting on the coast, he didn't care at all. Hancock didn't care, or rather, she even forgot about it. The hard-flying squirrel was messed up in the wind. Emotions, the people who are on a warship, are all forgotten objects. On the street. Liang looked at the lively streets around him, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he felt the relaxed atmosphere. The management of Daughter Island is still very appropriate, and the residents in Daughter Island will not be affected by the war, and everyone has a very pure smile on their faces. Just when Liang passed a CIA restaurant, Suddenly, a voice caught his attention. "Don't touch me, who are you?" A sound full of harmless people and animals came out. It's a man's voice. In Daughter Island, the man's voice could be heard, which surprised Liang. It stands to reason that in addition to him, there should not be a second man in Daughter's Island. But here, he happened to bump into it, and he had no reason not to take a look at the situation. Looking at it, as early as in the restaurant, a group of women surrounded them, as if they saw something rare, and the discussion came out. Is this the man? We don't have anything under him. Yes, this is the man in the legend. Like Master Liang, he is a man. We don't allow men to appear here, we have to notify the guards and drive him out. Quote. After Liang pushed aside the crowd, he saw the scene inside. A familiar figure appeared in his sight. This is a young man wearing a straw hat, looking around innocently, asking in confusion, "By the way, who are you? Why are you here now?" Liang's eyes flickered, a little suspicious. He naturally knew who the person in front of him was. This person is Luffy the Straw Hat. But, why did Luffy arrive here after so long? This is a question worth thinking about. It stands to reason that the ability of the Bartholomew Bear can only fight for 3 days and 3 nights, but obviously, more than 3 days and 3 nights have passed since the incident in the Chambord Islands. Luffy. The corners of Liang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly. Immediately, Luffy's eyes were fixed on Liang's body, his eyes were round, and he quickly took a half step back subconsciously, pointing at Liang, a little scared. You guy is actually here. Luffy gritted his teeth, full of anger, said. Why can't I be here? It's you, why are you here? Liang asked with a faint smile. When the people around saw that it was Liang, their expressions showed some admiration and respect. This is Lord Liang who can marry Lord Snakeji. They should treat each other respectfully. Bear this guy. Luffy gritted his teeth, looked at Liang fiercely, and said, I just climbed out of the abyss. Abyss. Liang was even more puzzled. He had never heard of the abyss in Daughter Island. Lord Liang, in the south, there is a very deep hole. What he said may be that hole. A woman saw Liang's doubts and quickly explained. So that's the case. Has there been a deviation in the Bartholomew's ability route? Liang suddenly realized, and the doubts in his heart were solved. NLT, 48 and GT. Chapter 262 Want to save him. I give you a chance. Unexpectedly, Luffy may have fallen into the hole, and the plot in the original book never appeared again, but on the contrary, another plot appeared. With the arrival of Liang, it brought a huge turning point in Luffy's life. Luffy doesn't know Hancock, nor does he know the so-called Dragon's Hoof. Besides, the current Luffy, who just climbed out of the hole, didn't even know that his brother had been arrested by the Navy headquarters and publicly executed. As a caring person, Liang felt that it was necessary for him to let Luffy in front of him understand what was now sweeping the entire sea. You bastard. Luffy's face was full of badness, and he stared at Liang, saying. Naturally, he would not forget Liang. Back then, it was Liang who made him feel deeply powerless for the first time when he was on the terrifying 3-masted sailboat. Fortunately, Nami and Robin came back in the end, but he still couldn't forget the powerlessness at that time. Part of the reason why he wants to become stronger is that under the control of Liang's absolute strength at that time, the feeling of powerlessness generated by him made him stubbornly want to surpass Liang. Don't be so angry, the next thing will make you even more angry. Haven't you seen the posters from the Navy recently? Liang waved his hand, and then many onlookers dispersed. Here, let him handle it, these people are very relieved. After all, Liang's identity is Lord Snakeji's husband. This identity is quite useful when the daughter is here. Follow me to a quiet place and I'll tell you the truth. Liang looked at Luffy and said slowly. Huh. Luffy snorted coldly, but still followed Liang and gradually left the restaurant. In a quiet forest. Liang held a newspaper in his hand, threw it to Luffy, and said with a smile, "Look at the above, you will know what to do next." Fake it up. Luffy looked at Liang suspiciously, then looked at the surrounding environment, and said, "It's just a newspaper, but taking him to such a remote place makes him feel a little wary." But he still caught the newspaper and read it carefully. In an instant, a person in the image caught his eye, making his expression gradually dull. Ace. Luffy's mouth moved slightly, his throat was dry, and he lost his voice. What's going on? He then looked down and saw everything in the newspaper. Immediately, his entire face was full of shock, his eyes were a little anxious and hasty. He looked at Liang, and said, "Ace, what happened to him? Didn't you see? He's been arrested and will be executed in public soon." Liang replied calmly. "Impossible." Luffy kept shaking his head, not daring to accept the fact, and said, "How could Ace be caught? It's absolutely impossible. There must be something wrong. Now is not the time for you to believe this. If you don't, he will be publicly executed soon. Are you here to stand by and watch Ace die?" Liang narrowed his eyes slightly, smiled, and said, "No, I have to save him. I have to save Ace." Luffy's eyes popped, his expression changed greatly. He said. After he finished speaking, he kicked his feet and rushed towards the sea outside the forest. "Come back and calm down for me." Liang was expressionless, reached out and grabbed Luffy's shoulder directly. "Let go of me." Luffy's face was full of anger, he shouted loudly, struggled continuously, and attacked Liang. Overlord is domineering. Chapter 262 want to save him. I give you a chance. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. And LT, 49 and GT. Overlord is domineering. The corners of Liang's mouth moved slightly, and a terrifying aura filled his body, covering Luffy's body. At the same time, with a flick of his hand, he threw Luffy on the branch that was once again, smashing the branch to split a mark. Boom! Luffy slammed into the trunk of the tree, and gradually fell to the ground, vomiting blood, and was very embarrassed. But his eyes didn't change when he looked at Liang. His face was stubborn, and he roared, "Why did you stop me? I'm going to save Ace." Idiot! Overlord Liang's arrogance descended directly on Luffy and said, "How do you save him? Now, he is being held in Pushin City. I have been to that place before, and I also escaped from there. It took me a lot of effort to escape from the most common Red Lotus hell. And your brother Ace, he is being held in the deepest, infinite hell. You are just a pirate, or a pirate with a bounty of hundreds of millions. How can you save him? Can you enter the advanced city? Stop joking." After Liang's words, Luffy gradually calmed down. However, he was still unwilling to just stand by and look at Liang, gritted his teeth and said, What do you want to do? Are you going to save him? I can give you a chance." The corners of Liang's mouth moved slightly, and he smiled lightly. Well. Luffy's pupils shrank. Although he lacks the roots, it does not mean that he is not vigilant. Liang in front of him was once his enemy. But now, the other party would actually help him, which made him feel a bit of surprise in his heart. He couldn't figure out what the other party was thinking, and he couldn't think of what the other party was doing to help him. Why? Luffy's eyes remained motionless, fixed on Liang's body, and said, "Heard." Liang looked very calm, and said with a smile, "Why? I can't give you the answer to this question. However, you can understand that I want to make this calm sea more lively. 0. If it wasn't for you, this war would have been a lot less fun." Liang said with a bit of interest in his eyes. Without Luffy driving the turmoil in the advancing city, without the group of pirates joining the battlefield, many things would not have happened. Such a top war is not a complete top war. As for the number of deaths, Liang never cared about this. What he cares about is his own mood. "Will you help me?" Luffy's eyes turned red as he looked at Liang and asked. He's not stupid, and advancing into a place like the city must be heavily guarded. If he broke in rashly, it is very likely that he would be caught without even seeing Ace's shadow. In this case, he had to borrow the power of others. Since Liang said so, even if he knew in his heart that the other party had bad intentions, he recognized it. Because, he has to save Ace. Relying on him alone, his strength is too weak. The most important thing is that he cannot rely on himself to enter the advanced city to rescue Ace. It's up to you to think. Liang looked at Luffy meaningfully and said calmly, I can take you into the advanced city smoothly, what do you think? Whether you want to agree or not depends on your own thoughts, I have no way to interfere. Good. Luffy nodded quickly, his face firm, said. No matter what the opportunity is, he has to try it. Chapter 263_UO has to be repaid. Remember, this is only one chance. Liang looked at Luffy and said meaningfully, this time, you owe me. In the future, this debt will always be repaid. Have you figured it out? I figured it out, take me into the advanced city. I want to save Ace. Luffy nodded solemnly. At present, his head is hot, and he has no other ideas other than saving Ace. No matter what the conditions, even at the cost of his 20 years of life, he would take the chance to save Ace. This is the belief in his heart, and no difficulty can stop it. It's pure brotherhood. With a smile, Liang smiled slowly, if that's the case, then I will fulfill your wish. In the next few days, I will wait for you to go to a place to settle down properly. Every day, someone will come to deliver food to you. Soon, I will arrange for you to follow the Navy team and go to the advanced city, 340. It just so happens that at that time, I will also do it myself. During this period of time, you have to stay honest and don't make any noise. If you are discovered, it will be difficult for me to arrange you into the Navy team. Liang said, do you understand? I see. Luffy nodded quickly and agreed, his eyes were as firm as ever. No matter what obstruction, he will break open. Ace must not be executed, the agreement between them, but to become one piece. In any case, he must rush to the advanced city and rescue Ace. Follow me. Liang glanced at Luffy's appearance and said lightly. Under his leadership, the two came to the edge of Daughter Island. Here, there was an abandoned house. On weekdays, few people would come here. Just here. Liang pointed to the house and reminded, you try not to let others find out. Besides, there will be no Navy coming here. You can rest assured on this point. What you need to pay attention to is to take care of your own heart. If you cause trouble, disturb the Navy, and save Ace, you will have nothing to do with it. Remember this. Liang explained everything that needed attention. If Luffy breaks the law, he will naturally not lead the opponent to the advanced city. His words always count. As for that group of Navy, it is impossible to come here. Even if there is an urgent matter, the Navy will not dare to step into the Daughter Island without consent. Not only because of Hancock, but also Liang's name shocked the Navy. Don't say that the person who came here is a lieutenant general. Even if the general comes here, he has to behave in a proper manner and act according to the rules of the Daughter Island. I know. Luffy nodded again, persevering. A lot of times, he would lose the chain and lose a string in his head. But when faced with something important, he never loses the chain. Under such circumstances, he naturally understood that it would be the best outcome for him to follow Liang's arrangement. Every day, I'll have people bring food over. Liang finally asked, if you have nothing to do, you'd better not go out. Finished talking. Without turning his head, he gradually disappeared from Luffy's sight. I must rescue Ace. Luffy took a deep breath, turned around, and walked into the house. The dark house still echoed with his serious words. Ace, wait for me. Daughter Island, inside the palace. Li Ang lay on the sofa, looked at the 5 beautiful women in front of him, and said with a smile, "How does it feel to be here?" Chapter 263_.UO has to be repaid. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. And LT, 51 and GT. Li Ang lay on the sofa, looked at the 5 beautiful women in front of him, and said with a smile, "How does it feel to be here?" "It's such a comfortable day." Perona smiled and said, "The days here are very different from the horror barks. Here, you can enjoy the real princess-like treatment." Hearing Perona's words, the rest of Khalifa and Kurla nodded quickly. Shalulia Palace smiled and didn't speak. Such a day, in her opinion, was nothing but ordinary. Only, she didn't speak. When she was in contact with the girls, she finally got rid of the bad temper that Tianlong people should have, and completely integrated into this small group. She learned to be humble, low-key and so on. The arrogant and domineering character of the Tianlong people has been completely eliminated from her. It was impossible to see her arrogant appearance. Hancock was sitting on the sofa. She was wearing a dark purple slit cheongsam, revealing a pair of long legs that were as white as jade. She stepped on black high-heeled shoes, which was very charming. "By the way, Hancock, the navy outside, why don't you just ignore it?" With a smile, Li Ang looked at Hancock's delicate and flawless face and asked. "It is estimated that in 3 days, the official departure will be made." Hancock pondered for a moment, looked at Li Ang, blushed slightly, and replied, "The time they gave was 3 days. Now, 3 days later, in total, it has taken them nearly a week." "I'll come with you." Li Ang thought about it and smiled. "Really?" Hancock's long eyelashes trembled, his pretty face was ecstatic, and he hurriedly asked. This way, she originally thought it would be very boring. After all, without Li Ang's company, she always felt empty in her heart. But after hearing Li Ang's words, her mood instantly became very excited. "With Li Ang's company, it doesn't matter where you go. I will also bring a person lurking in the warship and take him to the advanced city by the way. Moreover, I also want to witness the outbreak of this war." Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and said bluntly. "Are you taking someone? If it's your arrangement, it will be fine." Hancock's delicate face was ruddy and bloody, and he had blind faith in Li Ang. "Sir." Khalifa and the other 4 daughters looked at Li Ang's position and couldn't help asking. "Just be good and wait for me to come back. Before I come back, you will rest here for a while. Don't worry, I will be back soon." Li Ang looked at the girls with a smile and said 0.2. Immediately, the girls felt a little disappointed, but they also tenderly understood the reason why Li Ang did not bring them. If there are too many people, it is easy to attract the attention of others. Even Li Ang will inevitably be blocked. So, these days, I have to pain you guys. The corner of Li Ang's mouth curled into an arc, and he rushed towards Khalifa beside him, saying. The girls exclaimed, their faces gradually turned crimson, and their mood recovered. For a while, there were bursts of intriguing sounds from the entire empty hall. However, all the guards here have been dispatched to leave. And under the cover of Li Ang's domineering look, no one can easily approach here. Therefore, Li Ang can completely let go of his body and mind, and enjoy it, the feeling of blood breaking out completely. Chapter 264_Departure. Inside the splendid palace. The half-hanging crystal lamp hanging above exudes a golden light, illuminating the whole house, and the warm light makes people feel deeply comfortable. The 4 girls, Khalifa, Perona, Zaluria Palace, and Kurla, were exhausted, and each dragged their heavy bodies back to the room, unable to bear the continuation of the fight any longer. In the position left in the hall, Hancock was left alone. At the moment, her pretty face was blushing slightly, and she looked at Li Ang shyly, her beautiful eyes flickering, and she didn't dare to look directly. Witnessing that earth-shattering battle, the scene of Li Ang fighting the 4 women, really made her who had no personnel, feel a little embarrassed. If it wasn't for Liang forcing her to stay here, she would have left the hall shyly. At this time, Liang was looking at Hancock in front of him without a trace of tiredness on his face. He looked at Hancock as if he were looking at an extremely exquisite piece of art. Hancock is sitting on the sofa, looking a little restrained, her slender waist is straight, and the purple slit robe outlines the arc of her perfect figure, which is very charming. A pair of straight and slender long legs, stepping on black high-heeled shoes, folded and placed diagonally. 26. She put her hands on her thighs. Her long black hair that was long and supple was scattered to the position of the sofa. Her long hair was very straight and smooth. In combination with her charming figure, her straight legs were simply too impressive. People's blood is boiling. In the slit-style purple cheongsam, the white big legs are exposed, the skin is like jade, almost like snow, impeccably white and crystal clear. Liang's breathing rhythm changed, and his eyes stared straight at Hancock. Under his gaze, Hancock became obviously more shy, lowered his head, looked at his hands, at a loss, as if he was holding a little rabbit in his heart, pounding. At the same time, on her delicate face, the originally fair complexion gradually became ruddy, the blood went straight to the forehead, and the black hair seemed to be emitting white smoke. How could Liang endure seeing such a beautiful Hancock? Immediately, he was like a wolf, swooping towards Hancock's position. Ah! Hancock exclaimed, the ruddy blood spread to the white neck, and even the crystal clear ears were red, just like the sunset on the horizon. Close up. Liang could smell the fragrance emanating from Hancock's body, and he was refreshed, and the fragrance rushed to his face, filling his sense of smell. And Hancock was even more nervous, raised her little heart, closed her eyes slightly, and her long eyelashes fluttered, showing her inner clutter. How to do? Does Master Liang want that? So embarrassing. How does that feel? So excited, so nervous. Feeling the heat from Liang, Hancock was in a turmoil, thinking nervously and constantly, closing his eyes tightly, not daring to open them. Soon, she felt that the clothes slipped, and the coolness of the breeze blowing to the front attacked the skin. She was naked, and her face was even more rosy and could not be contained. For a while, an intriguing sound came from the empty hall. The bright red flowed slowly, from the sofa to the floor, which was extremely dazzling. The next day. Hancock opened his eyes, his whole body was numb, his limbs were weak, and his delicate face was exhausted. Especially the stinging pain that came. I am afraid that it is a problem for her to walk. As soon as she entered her eyes, she saw the face of a man, with a smile on the corner of her mouth, and squeezed her whole body into the other's arms, like a little girl who wanted warmth. Awake. With a smile on his face, Liang said, holding Hancock's body in his arms. It's all your fault. Hancock's beautiful eyes glanced at Liang, and snorted, recalling yesterday's picture. She still can't recover from her shyness. Simply, it's crazy. She never thought that she would have such a crazy day. But in the end, she was defeated, and Liang was still alive and well. Even if she begged for mercy, it was useless. After she was so tired, she almost fainted. So much so that she can't recover now. Chapter 264-Departure. So much so that she can't recover now. Okay, it's all my fault. Liang rubbed Hancock's black hair and smiled. At this time, Hancock's face turned ruddy again, and she was about to stand up, but the stinging pain almost made her fall to the floor. She was barefoot, revealing her snow-white insteps, biting her pink lips, looking at Liang, and said, "You, come and help me." "What help you?" Liang stood up, supported Hancock's jade arm, and asked. "I, by myself, can't go to the bathroom." Hancock's eyes dodged, and she was so ashamed that she could not wait to find a crack to crawl in. Just too embarrassing. Actually talking to a man like that. It's still Liang's fault, who made him do that yesterday, otherwise, people wouldn't be able to walk on the ground. That's right, it's all his fault. Hancock took a deep breath. His face was reddish, his head was lowered, and his black and supple hair slid in front of her along the trajectory, like a helpless little girl. Li Ang's eyes flashed, and the corners of his mouth curled into an arc, but he didn't laugh at the other party. He supported Hancock and gradually walked towards the bathroom. A few minutes later. The door to the bathroom. Hancock was carried out by Li Ang, and when he opened his mouth, he bit Li Ang's shoulder and said angrily, "You bastard, it's already like that, come back." Li Ang laughed and didn't answer. A few days passed in a flash. This day. The location of the palace gate. The mother-in-law looked at Hancock with a worried expression, and said, "Hancock, don't be too arrogant. Although there is Lord Li Ang, if you can avoid trouble, try not to cause trouble. Come on, you old woman is too nonsense." Hancock's face was cold and he said impatiently. At this time, how could she see the shy and pleasant little girl's attitude in front of Li Ang? "Hancock, you must remember," the mother-in-law said with a serious face. Hancock waved his hand casually, looking at Li Ang in front of him. His originally cold eyes gradually softened, his pretty face appeared a little rosy, and he walked forward with a pair of straight long legs. "Lord Li Ang, we are ready to go." Hancock walked beside Li Ang and whispered. The attitude of this little daughter was completely different from that just now. "Yeah." Li Ang glanced back at the four daughters of Khalifa, Perona, Kurla, and Zaluria Palace. With a smile on his face, he waved his hand in a gesture of farewell. The four goddesses were reluctant to part, but they still chose to stay here. Daughter Island, very safe, there will be no danger. Immediately, Li Ang took the two of Hancock and gradually walked to the coast. A long way away, I saw a warship, standing on the edge of the coast, motionless. "You board first, and I'll be there in a moment." Li Ang looked at the position of the coast on the other side and instructed Hancock beside him. "Yeah." Hancock nodded lightly and gradually walked towards the position of the warship. On the way, her ruddy complexion gradually cooled down, and she made a false report, returning to the arrogant attitude of the Empress, and walking towards the warship step by step. In front of Li Ang, she is a well-behaved little woman, but in front of others, she is the arrogant Chihuahai Empress, the powerful emperor of the daughter country. Chapter 265 _ Marin Vando. Daughters Island, Coast. On a warship. Hancock, who was wearing a purple slit robe, stepped on black high-heeled shoes, and climbed the stairs of the warship step by step. A pair of straight and slender long legs like jade were very conspicuous. The long black hair fluttered in the wind, revealing a delicate and flawless face, and her beautiful eyes looked straight ahead without any emotional fluctuations. Except for Li Ang, anyone in her eyes is a passerby, and she doesn't need to take it to heart. With the arrival of Hancock, the Navy was in an uproar. Female, Empress Hancock, the most beautiful woman in the world, so beautiful. So beautiful, the appearance of the Empress is indeed the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. No way, my heart is going to be captured, what a beautiful Empress. Quote. A group of Navy eyes turned into love, completely fascinated by Hancock's charm, and they don't even know what their surname is. Humph. Flying Squirrel's pupils shrank, and he snorted coldly, with a strong aura. Immediately, all the Navy recovered, their faces turned pale, and they looked at Hancock with horror. At that moment just now, they were involuntarily fascinated and completely unable to extricate themselves. This is the queen known as the world's most beautiful woman, Hancock. Hancock, please take your seat, and you can sail. Flying Squirrel looked solemnly at Hancock and said, "You're already late." Late, but everyone will forgive Igia. Hancock laughed, his red lips moved slightly, and said lightly, "Because Igia is really so beautiful." After the words were finished, the entire Navy was surging. Everyone was once again fascinated by Hancock's charm. Sweet and sweet. Hancock glanced at the group of navies, and in his eyes, the humble existence that could not be seen at all directly stimulated the ability of the devil fruit. In an instant, all the navy was petrified, stiff and immobile. Well, the flying squirrel's face changed dramatically, and he noticed that even the firm-willed him was a little shaken. Immediately, he held a dagger and stabbed the back of his hand violently. Puff! The blood splashed and the tingling sensation kept him sane. Use pain to avoid glamour. Hancock was a little surprised. His face was calm, but, your subordinates are gone, and now you are like a bear commander. You were wrong. Flying Squirrel was expressionless, his voice was hoarse, and he said with difficulty, 1 and 0 are different. In my eyes, there is no difference. Hancock's face was cold and his feet moved, and he gradually left the position of the ship's board, entered her room, and quietly waited for Li Ang's arrival. The other side. On the edge of the coast, in an abandoned room. Li Ang pushed open the door, looked at Luffy who couldn't extricate himself from sleep, and saw the other party's snoring bubbles, and waved his hand helplessly. Really a worrying guy. In this case, he could still fall asleep. Get up, it's time for us to go. Li Ang kicked Luffy's head violently. The attack covered with the color of the armed, kicked Luffy into the wall in one fell swoop. Pain came over, Luffy opened his eyes, hurriedly held his head, and shouted, "It hurts, it hurts." Immediately, he saw Li Ang in front of him and asked suspiciously, "Did you bring me something to eat?" Chapter 265 Marin Fando. Immediately, he saw Li Ang in front of him and asked suspiciously, "Did you bring me something to eat?" "Oui, it's time to advance to the city." Li Ang's mouth moved slightly and said lightly. "Well." Luffy's face gradually became serious, he nodded solemnly, and said, "Okay." At the same time, a firm emotion arose in his heart. "Ace, wait for me." ... Sail. The flying squirrel felt the stinging pain on the back of his hand, his face was calm, and he said nothing. The helmsman controlled the steering wheel, and the warship sailed gradually, far away from the range of Daughter's Island. Immediately, he looked at the group of subordinates who were still petrified, feeling extremely helpless, but there was nothing he could do. Inside a large arsenal of warships. Li Ang threw Luffy in the quiet arsenal and ordered, "Hide here, don't let anyone find out. Otherwise, you won't be able to save your ace." "I see." Luffy nodded, looked around, and quickly stuffed himself into a wooden bucket. "See." Li Ang retracted his gaze, and the figure gradually disappeared from the arsenal. His arrival did not arouse anyone's awareness, even the flying squirrel could not detect his presence. In a clean and tidy room. Hancock looked in the mirror, straightening his hair. At this time, behind her, Li Ang's figure appeared. Hancock, who was about to subconsciously attack, stopped abruptly, his pretty face showed a hint of crimson, lowered his head, and said, "Lord Li Ang, you are back." "Yes." Li Ang stood forward, and his hands naturally wrapped around Hancock's slender waist. Feeling the boneless waist, Li Ang was somewhat amazed. This slender waist seems to be broken at any time, how can it accommodate the two terrifying little white rabbits above? "Aren't you tired?" "Diaresis, yes, it will be discovered." Hancock felt Li Ang's palm, his face was rosy, and he whispered. She leaned against Li Ang's chest weakly, vomited like blue, and her face was bloody. As Hancock said, "Do something indescribable here and there's a good chance someone will hear it." Li Ang stopped enough, and after he was over his addiction, he took Hancock to the window of the room, looked at the sea outside the window, and talked with a smile. Hancock leaned on Li Ang's shoulder, looking at the window with beautiful eyes. On the surface, she was looking at the sea, but in fact, she was looking at Li Ang's face reflected in the window, just looking at Li Ang without blinking. "Are you still peeking at me?" Li Ang's eyes flashed, he rubbed Hancock's delicate face, Dejao, and smiled. "No way." Hancock's eyes dodged, and he denied it, and his fair face was ruddy. It was too easy for her to lie in front of Li Ang. With her flushed face and her dodging eyes, it could be seen that she was wrong. Li Ang put his arms around Hancock's waist from behind, his chin rested on Hancock's shoulder, and he could vaguely smell the fragrance on the other side. Smooth black hair slid across his face. Hancock pretended to look at the window with her eyes. In fact, her heart was numb, and her mood became shy. She just forced herself not to show it. As for the constantly changing scene outside the window, she didn't take it to heart. The two snuggled together, not speaking. There is no communication, but there is a warm atmosphere. Just holding it so quietly, with a smile on his face, motionless, quietly watching the sea outside the window. Chapter 266 * Pirates. The warship sailed all the way and left the position of Daughter's Island far away. From here, the traces of Daughter's Island can no longer be seen. The sailing speed of warships is worthy of recognition. Using professional materials to know, can also effectively prevent sea kings from suddenly attacking from the bottom of the sea. The big reason why the Navy can safely pass through the windless zone is because the bottom of the warship is made of special materials, which can effectively prevent the attacks of the sea kings. On board. The Flying Squirrel frowned as he looked at the approaching ships ahead. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, this is probably a pirate group. A Navy pondered for a moment, looked cautious, and told the truth. A black spot magnified infinitely in the Flying Squirrel's sight. As expected. What you see is a pirate ship. Unexpectedly, this pirate ship, seeing the naval warship, actually refused to retreat, and had to face the naval warship. Flying Squirrel's face was calm, and he said, "Initiate an artillery attack, no matter who they are. Anyway, kill them all and let the pirate ship sink to the bottom of the sea." "Yes, Lieutenant General." The Marines left quickly. The turrets of the warship were aimed at the pirate ship ahead, waiting for the Flying Squirrel to give orders. At this time, Flying Squirrel raised his brows and looked at the skeleton flag of the pirate ship in front of him, a little surprised. Starry Sky Pirates. The Star Pirates, it is said, 437 is a group of notorious pirates from the West Sea. Why is it notorious? They rarely fight against ordinary people, and rarely against pirates. In most cases, they fight against the Navy. Therefore, their bounty is very high, and the Navy has offered a bounty specifically for them. The purpose is to bring them to justice and prevent them from harming other navies. In the room. Li Ang held Hancock and looked at the position of the window, and also saw the ship of the Starry Sky Pirates. "I didn't expect that a pirate would be so bold." Hancock smiled sweetly, with a seductive smile, and said. Li Ang also showed a smile and joked, "Dare to face the collision with the Navy warship, it is not easy for them to think about it. Fortunately, I can detect that there is one pirate in their group who has the strength of a lieutenant general. Then the one here, Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, isn't the catastrophe imminent?" Hancock's delicate and flawless face, with a hint of interest, said. "Maybe, let's just stay silent. If the Navy can't handle it, we'll do it in the end, and the result won't change." Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled lightly. CGCF. He is still very interested in the exchange of fire between the Navy and the pirates. As for which side would win, he didn't care at all. If the Navy is defeated, in order to avoid being unable to rush to the advanced city, it is enough for him to frighten the group of pirates. But at present, there is a Flying Squirrel Lieutenant General here, and it should not be easily defeated. The strength of the Lieutenant General of the Navy headquarters is not bad. If he was defeated so easily, it would not be worthy of the title of Lieutenant General of the headquarters. The positions of the warship and the pirate ship are constantly approaching each other. Li Ang put his arms around Hancock, leaned against each other's ear, and said with a smile, "Why don't we make a bet?" "What bet?" Hancock's white ears were a little itchy, and she was blown, which made her face blushing, her voice became subtle, and her whole body was a little weak. "You said, the Navy will win, or the pirates will win." Li Ang smiled and asked. "Well, I guess it should be the pirates. If we don't do it, the pirates should win. After all, since they dared to collide with the Navy head-on, they must have some strength. Hancock pondered for a moment and expressed his guesses. Then you're betting that the pirates will win. The corners of Li Ang's mouth twitched slightly, and he smiled. Well, then, what's the stake? Hancock looked at Li Ang with a hint of curiosity and expectation, and asked. Chapter 266 Pirates. Hancock looked at Li Ang with a hint of curiosity and expectation, and asked. Stakes. Li Ang thought for a while, leaned against Hancock's little red ears, and said meaningfully, You win, I'll give you a kiss, if you lose, you give me a kiss. No, it's all my fault. Hancock hurriedly shook Li Ang's arm. The coquettish empress was even more charming. Li Ang couldn't help taking a bite, with a smile on his face. Immediately, Hancock blushed and said angrily, You haven't won yet, so let's close the bet, then what can I do? You rascal. Then you can also accept the bet you won first. I didn't stop you, did I? Li Ang smiled strangely and said. Huh. Hancock bulged and said, I'll ignore you. Really? Li Ang rolled his eyes and said. Really, absolutely true. Hancock pouted, looking a little angry. See. Li Ang put his hands under Hancock's armpits and said with a smile, I think you still ignore me. Ah ha ha, ha ha ha. Hancock burst into laughter and burst into tears, and perfectly outlined her figure hidden under the cheongsam. Every movement caused a huge sway to the two little white rabbits, and it was impossible to look away. Don't make my mistake. Hancock hurriedly begged for mercy, constantly dodging Li Ang's attacks. Call husband and I'll let you go. The corners of Li Ang's mouth were slightly raised, and he joked. I don't call. Hancock raised his head stubbornly and said very proudly. Do you call? Li Ang smiled a little strangely and continued to ask. Don't call. Hancock used his delicate face to give Li Ang a grimace, looking very naughty and cute. Then don't blame me for being ruthless, take it. Li Ang attacked quickly, scratching Hancock's laughter with both hands, so fast that Hancock couldn't dodge even if he wanted to, so he could only passively accept the move. Of course. During this fight, Hancock's pretty face gradually turned crimson. Because, she found that Li Ang was not simply scratching his acupoints. Many times, many parts of her body were touched by Li Ang. Immediately, she discovered Li Ang's plan and gritted her teeth. You idiot. Ha ha, it was discovered. Li Ang laughed out loud, but it was no surprise. Instead, his attacks intensified. Hancock blushed, tears were flowing, and he couldn't help but laugh. Finally, she still begged for mercy, looked at Li Ang with a pitiful expression, and said, Old husband. That's good, my wife is so good. Li Ang rubbed Hancock's face and smiled. Hancock snorted and said nothing. But her beautiful eyes have a bit of affection, and she obviously already has a strange feeling. When fighting with Li Ang, she also felt a warm atmosphere. This kind of atmosphere, she likes very much. Li Ang took advantage of the situation and hugged Hancock's waist, pointed to the position of the window, and said with a smile, Look, they went to war. Chapter 267 War. On board. Flying Squirrel's face was solemn, and he saw the people on the pirate ship on the opposite side. There are 11 people in total, and the one headed is the captain of the Starry Sky Pirates. Captain of the Star Pirates, Ross. The Flying Squirrel slowly pulled out the saber from his waist, his face serious, and said, The bounty is 200 million berry. You know, this is the first half of the Great Waterway. Here, it is quite rare to encounter a pirate with a bounty of 200 million berry. Generally, this kind of pirate has been to the New World and returned from the New World. And Ross in front of him has been to the New World more than once, and after getting a lot of tempering from there, he will return to the first half of the Great Channel. To say his purpose. Naturally, to hunt the Navy. Such a person, the Navy will definitely send manpower to encircle and suppress them. It's a pity that many times, Rhodes and others have escaped from death. At this time, the piercing board of the pirate ship. Ross looked at the flying squirrel in front of him and said with a faint smile, "Who am I talking about?" It turns out that it is the Lieutenant General of the headquarters, the Flying Squirrel Lieutenant General. Today, I am fortunate enough to meet a Lieutenant General, it is simply too lucky. Quote. He was wearing black clothes, about 1.8 meters tall, with a burly stature, black hair and a short head, sharp eyes, and no less than 5 scars on his face, which made his face feel unrecognizable. It seems that he is the kind of evil spirit. There were 10 people standing behind him. Everyone is extremely powerful. A pirate group, plus the captain, is only 11 people. Different from other pirates, the people recruited by the Star Pirates are all strong. As for the weak, they will not accept it at all. They don't need too much in quantity, just good quality. You guys are really bold. Flying Squirrel was expressionless and asked coldly, "How dare you appear here and block my way? Are you not afraid that the general will come?" "General." Ross sneered and said slowly, "Could it be, you think I don't pay attention to what happened at sea recently? The general is already too busy now, how can he be distracted to deal with a small role like me?" "So you know." Flying Squirrel's eyelids twitched and said, "Of course I know. So, today, no one here will come to reinforce you. Even the reinforcements are those little bastards that can be killed easily. If nothing else, important people have already arrived at Marin Fando to make arrangements. After all, this is the battle with one of the 4 emperors, the Whitebeard pirates, how could it be slack?" Ross calmly analyzed the situation and said. Seeing his appearance, Flying Squirrel's heart became heavier. He calmly looked at the location of Hancock's room. If the other party can make reinforcements, then this so-called Star Pirates is not something to be afraid of. But it is a pity that it is basically impossible to want the other party to do something. Unless the warship is about to be destroyed, the other party has to do it. Otherwise, even if their navy is killed, I am afraid that the other party will remain indifferent. What's the matter? Is there any help? Ross was keenly aware of the Flying Squirrel's gaze and joked. At the same time, his mood also became vigilant. Chapter 267-C War. At the same time, his mood also became vigilant. A person who can make flying squirrels be regarded as helpers is naturally good. He has to be 12 points of energy. It is not unreasonable that the Star Pirates have killed the Navy for so long, but it has not been destroyed by the Navy. Each of them is very vigilant, and in the face of any battle and danger, they will go all out, never underestimate the enemy, and will not fight unprepared battles. Therefore, it is extremely difficult to catch them. Even if the generals were dispatched, they had already heard the wind, and they did not know where to hide in the sea. Once the general did, they started making waves again. Under such circumstances, the Navy is also at a loss. It's impossible to send a general all the time to pay attention to the every move of the Star Pirates, right? If this is the case, the consumption of the naval headquarters may be too great. Every general is an important resource of the Navy headquarters, and it is impossible to carry out a task at all times in order to deal with a pirate group. In contrast, the general has other more important tasks to perform. Therefore, what the Star Pirates do is also quite accurate. They grasp the weakness of the Navy headquarters, so they could not be arrested, but they could still madly kill the Navy on the sea. This is also the most troublesome place for the Navy headquarters. When the time comes, they will hide. When the generals leave, they will appear again. They know how to advance and retreat, and every battle is premeditated and planned. This kind of organized pirates is the most troublesome for the Navy. Diaresis, too much talk is useless, only a war. Flying Squirrel's face was calm, and he was holding a saber, which was covered with a layer of black-armed domineering. Under the sun, the blade exudes a chill that makes the scalp tingle. Just to my liking. A smile appeared on Rhodes' face, with his bare hands, and his fists also showed armed domineering. Behind him, each of the 10 subordinates knows how to display their armed colors. This is where the flying squirrel gets the most stress. If it was just Rhodes, he could definitely kill him, but with so many people on the other side, he knew how to be aggressive and besieged. Even if he is the strength of the lieutenant general of the headquarters, he can't ask for benefits. Brothers, get ready. Ross's eyes flashed and he said slowly. The 10 people standing behind him are all ready to attack, always ready to attack. Some are armed with guns, some are armed with knives, etc., and some are bare-handed, but everyone will be armed with domineering and knowledgeable domineering. The person with the gun, the bullet used is the Halu stone bullet. Good, this kind of bullet is quite expensive. It can be seen from the side that the star pirates really have a lot of wealth, and it is not accidental that they can build such a scale. In terms of funds, it is obvious that the star pirates have sufficient funds to build various weapons. Even Halu stone bullets are enough to show all this. Being stared at by 11 people, and his strength is not weak, makes the flying squirrel a little cautious, and the pressure in his heart arises spontaneously. If there is any loophole, I am afraid, it will usher in a fatal blow. The many navies standing beside the flying squirrel did not dare to move easily. They held long spears and aimed at Ross and the others in front of them. Their lips were trembling, and they were very nervous and uneasy. Obviously, they also know the name of the star pirates. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so cautious. The two were motionless, and the swords were drawn. The battle is imminent. Chapter 268-collision. Go back. Flying Squirrel's face was calm, and he whispered orders to the subordinates beside him. These people are not strong enough, and rushing up is just to die. So, with these soldiers and without such soldiers, the results are the same. Anyway, he doesn't expect his subordinates to help him deal with the enemy. Even if it delays one enemy, these soldiers are powerless. In order to avoid unnecessary casualties, countless Navy soldiers had to retreat to a safe range and not act rashly. Opposite the pirate ship, Ross looked at the flying squirrel's order, showed a smile, and said, "So, you are still a reasonable person." He didn't even care about these Navy soldiers. The only people who can take it seriously are flying squirrels. Or, the mysterious figure in the room just now. If the flying squirrel can be taken seriously, that person is definitely not weak. As for why the other party didn't appear, Ross couldn't figure it out. All in all, this trip, he will kill the flying squirrels. Get ready to do it. Ross secretly glanced at his companion behind him and said in a low voice. Don't worry, boss, my knife is already hungry and thirsty, and I desperately want to find the blood of a strong man to drink. My 950 bullets are also very lonely. And my fist, I just want to kill for fun. Quote. Behind him, the 10 pirates grinned, revealing stern faces. Murder is no stranger to them. Especially the Navy, the number of navies that died in their hands. If not 1,000, there are 800. This is their glorious record. Shave. Flying Squirrel narrowed his eyes slightly, kicked his feet, and his figure quickly disappeared. He must take the initiative to attack. If a battle breaks out here on the warship, it will easily spread to the group of Navy men, and if even the warship is penetrated, it will be troublesome. To avoid this situation, he can only choose the battlefield on the other side's pirate ship. Although that might not be good for his fight. But overall, it's nothing to worry about. Kill. Ross's double fists covered the armed color and domineering, and the speed was extremely fast, and he confronted the flying squirrel frontally. Boom. The flying squirrel held a large sword, covered in armed color, and slammed into Ross's fist. The confrontation between the armed color and the armed color erupted with a terrifying airflow that swept the audience. CGEC, bang. A pirate held a long spear, pulled the trigger, and a burst of gunfire erupted. The hailstone bullet pierced the air and arrived in front of the flying squirrel. His pupils shrank, holding the sword, and slid down violently. Puff! The hailstone bullets were all shot directly into the sea, causing a wave of seawater to roll over. Hey hey hey, do you want to react so fast? The sniper waved his hand helplessly and said. The bullet was shot flying, which was the most helpless thing for snipers. It's not that there is no hit, but the strength is not enough. At the same time, the pirate holding the blade slammed into the flying squirrel's position, bursting out with a fierce record. Call out, call out, call out. The collision of the blades brought a series of fierce records, which collided with each other. Chapter 268-collision. The collision of the blades brought a series of fierce records, which collided with each other. Boom! The board of the ship was cracked, a wooden pillar was cut off, and then fell to the sea, raising waves, ripples rolling, and rippling around. It's very troublesome. Flying Squirrel took a half step back, his face became heavier, looking at the 11 people in front of him, his voice was hoarse. It is still a bit difficult to contend against 11 pirates with one's own strength. Especially this group of pirates, each of them knows how to use their weapons and domineering, and everyone's bounty is no less than 100 million berg. These terrifying powerhouses are united together, and even flying squirrels have to feel the pressure. The suppression of numbers has put countless people at a disadvantage. Ross seized the opportunity and stepped on the board of the ship with his feet. The whole person was like a bullet, and his fists were bombarded at the back of the flying squirrel. The armed color was covered and it was extremely hard. Boom! Flying Squirrel, holding a dagger, turned around and blocked Ross's attack. At this moment, beside him, a woman appeared. She was tall and pretty. She was holding a dagger and her beautiful eyes were shining brightly. She stood behind the flying squirrel and stabbed it suddenly. Puff! The flying squirrel's back was cut open, and blood spattered. Hem! He groaned, gritted his teeth and forced Ross back, then turned sharply, holding the blade, and swiped across the woman's neck. Back! The woman's face changed slightly and she took a few steps back, but her skin was still cut. A small scar appeared on her neck, blood overflowed, and it was dazzling. She wiped the cold touch on her neck, her eyelids gradually lowered, and she looked at the flying squirrel with a bit of anger. Are you all right? Ross looked at the woman and asked. Fortunately, I must kill him with my own hands. The woman gritted her teeth, her heart was covered with anger, and her face that had been slightly beautiful became distorted in a blink of an eye, terrifying. Flying Squirrel quickly backed away, feeling the almost revealing of his back, and his expression became more and more solemn. His face also gradually turned pale, and if this goes on, he will be killed soon. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel. On the board of the warship, a group of navies looked anxious and shouted loudly. Some people are preparing to hold guns and pull the trigger at the group of pirates. Flying Squirrel shouted, Stop! Immediately, all the navy stopped their movements, and their faces were puzzled. The Flying Squirrel did not explain too much, and his eyes were fixed on Ross and the others in front of him, motionless. He didn't want to watch his men get killed. If bullets were useful to these people, there would be no such troublesome thing to happen. If the gun is fired, these people will definitely attack the Navy soldiers, and none of those men will survive. Therefore, considering the safety of these people, the flying skier had no choice but to stop the movements of his subordinates. Bullets are useless. Under this level of confrontation, it is unrealistic to kill one of them even if it is a hailstone bullet. Unless, using a special sniper rifle, kill people from thousands of meters away. Otherwise, the bullets fired by ordinary guns have a limited speed and can easily be blocked. Then, Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, what will you do? A meaningful smile on Rhodes' face, he mocked, we are still alone here. And you are injured again, how long can you last? Kill you, that's enough. Flying Squirrel was expressionless, holding the handle of the knife in both hands, the corners of his mouth moved slightly, shave. His figure disappeared in the next second. Appeared beside the woman, holding a blade and swiping past. Boom. With quick eyes and quick hands, Ross blocked the woman's side, collided with the flying squirrel, and used his armed fist to block the flying squirrel's attack abruptly. It was only at this time that the woman reacted, and she quickly took a few steps back, her chest heaving up and down, and she stared at the flying squirrel with a strong murderous intent in her eyes. Chapter 269-Defeat. Kill. Holding a dagger, the woman, unwilling to lag behind, stabbed the back of the flying squirrel. If this move hits, I'm afraid the flying skier will be half crippled if it doesn't die. At the same time, men with knives, sniper rifles, and maces were dispatched one after another. 11 people, all of them move hand in hand. The flying squirrel felt pressured in his heart, his scalp was numb, and he felt a strong sense of crisis. The woman behind him was getting closer and closer, and he had to push back Rhodes in front of him, quickly dodging the blow. Boom. The man holding the blade collided with the flying squirrel and grinned. It's been a long time since I was looking for someone with superb swordsmanship to baptize my knife. This time, I finally found a chance. The flying squirrel was expressionless, the armed color covered its left hand, and bombarded away violently. The man opposite was caught off guard and was hit in the chest from the front. Puff. Suddenly, a blood hole appeared in the man's chest. It seems that even the heart has been pierced directly, and the position behind him can be seen from the front. Ah! The man's throat was dry, and he stared blankly at his chest, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. With a thump, he fell to the ground, twitching all over, and died on the spot. Of the 11 pirates, 1 died and 10 remained. This idiot. Browson said coldly, I reminded him a long time ago, but unfortunately, this guy is still going his own way, thinking that he is invincible in the world. It's good, he was finally killed. Boss, go ahead and kill this damn vice admiral. The woman's face was full of anger, and she was indifferent as she watched her partner die. Except for Rhodes, everyone else can die. Moreover, the original 11 people may not all have deep friendships. This is an organization with Rhodes as a link, anyone can be less, but Rhodes cannot be lost. Okay, everyone, cheer up. Ross nodded solemnly and shouted. 10 people, all motivated the attack. Boom. The flying squirrel was instantly forced back, hit the position of the ship's board, split the ship's board, vomited blood, turned pale, and almost fell into the sea because of this. With his hands on the board of the ship, he stood up with difficulty, and glanced at the position of the warship from the corner of his eyes. Apart from a group of worried and screaming navies, nothing happened. Still, don't plan to do it. Chihuahua. Flying Squirrel was bitter in his heart, shook his head, and sighed. Why on earth do you keep looking at that place? Could it be that there is your support there? But now, why doesn't he show up? Ross was keenly aware of the flying squirrel's movements, sneered, and asked. He didn't dare to be careless, and his expression became very vigilant. If you encounter a hard stubble, it's game over. However, the other party has never appeared, and why? Is it because they look down on these weak people, or, this person, has nothing to do with flying squirrels? Yes. Suddenly, Rhodes had a hint of an answer in his heart, his eyes twinkled, his face full of smiles, and he looked at the flying squirrel. He said meaningfully, that person, shouldn't it be the Chihuahua that you are in charge of letting? No wonder you keep looking there. You want him to take action. Is it? Well. The flying squirrel's expression changed slightly, and he remained silent and silent. As expected, I didn't expect that I bumped into a Chihuahua. Ross's eyes narrowed slightly, with a bit of solemnity. Chapter 269-Defeat. Ross's eyes narrowed slightly, with a bit of solemnity. The strength of Chihuahua is not simple. They relied on the number of people to suppress the flying squirrel. If there is another Chihuahua, then they can only escape. The most terrifying thing is this Chihuahua the ones in the rumors? Those who are at the top of Chihuahua's strength are truly terrifying figures. 7. Wuhai. Behind Ross, the expressions of everyone also changed. If they encounter Chihuahua, then they have to take it seriously. In case Chihuahua suddenly makes a move, they must also think about the way back. However, the one inside probably doesn't want to do it. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to remain silent for so long. Ross knew very well the status of Shichibukai. Chihuahua just listens to the dispatch of the world government, and most of the time, he does things by his own will. Want to make Chihuahua work wholeheartedly? This is basically impossible. Right now, even if the flying squirrels are killed, as long as they don't interfere with the purpose of the Chihuahua, they will naturally be safe and sound. Thinking of this, Ross's face gradually eased. He laughed, looked at the flying squirrel, and said sarcastically, "Don't look at it, you are alone. Next, have you thought about how to die?" Presumptuous. Flying Squirrel's face was furious, holding a blade, using the Navy's sixth form to break out a strong attack. Boom, boom, boom. Just a few minutes. The people on both sides fought for no less than 10 rounds, and the flying squirrel was directly suppressed. There were too many people on the opposite side. Although he killed one person, there were still 10 people who needed him to contend. The physical exhaustion is getting bigger and bigger, and the flying squirrel has even smelled the breath of death. Boom. Suddenly, Rhodes burst out with terrifying power, and from the front, forced the flying squirrel back to the corner. The area of the pirate ship is still very wide, which can accommodate the battle of these dozen people. Of course. The battle has been stalemate until now, the board of the ship has been devastated, the floor is cracked, and many wooden pillars have been cut off and sank to the bottom of the sea. The flying squirrel was breathing quickly, his face was pale, and there were many scars on his body, which kept his state down to a certain level. On the other hand, Rhodes and the others are full of stamina and take turns to go into battle. They can completely use the crowd tactics to kill flying squirrels. It can't be delayed any longer. The flying skier knew this, gritted his teeth, and took the initiative to attack. A few minutes later. Boom. A loud bang. The flying squirrel was knocked into the air, separated from the position of the ship's board, and fell to the position of the sea. In the end, he stepped on the moon and returned to the boat after all, panting, kneeling on the ground with his legs and his hands on the ground, very embarrassed. There were many perforations of different sizes on his clothes, blood spilled out along the scars on the skin, and the whole body was covered with countless scars. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, let's help you. The Navy on the warship was angry and shouted. Even though they knew that the enemy in front of them was tyrannical, they still had to fight. Cowardly, what else are you doing in the Navy? Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, you are defeated. Ross stood in front of the flying squirrel and said with a faint smile, "Look, those wastes under your command are coming to avenge you. However, they are just a group of people without heads. Anyone with a discerning eye can see the outcome. Isn't it pretty obvious already? Chapter 270 Your Majesty, can you come out and see me?" Cough cough. The flying squirt vomited blood, looked extremely embarrassed, did not speak, and his face was extremely ugly. He supported the board with both hands and wanted to stand up, but the scar on his body was blocking his movements all the time, making him unable to move. Useless struggle. Ross sneered and said sarcastically. In his opinion, the flying squirrel has already been defeated. Although it is said that they use the number of people to suppress each other, but victory is victory, and there are no other words to say. Numbers are also fighting power. If numbers can win, that's fine. Flying Squirrel was alone, unable to face the siege of so many people, and finally fell into defeat. Boss, kill him. In the Starry Sky Pirates, the only woman walked up to the flying squirrel and said viciously. She was full of anger at the flying squirrel that ripped through the skin of her neck muscles, and she could not wait to slash the other side with thousands of cuts. Almost, she died. If she hadn't hid, she would have turned into a cold corpse like that idiot. The feud of life and death, how can you easily let go of each other? Don't worry, he won't make any big waves. A strong confidence appeared on Ross's face, and he smiled. Defeating the lieutenant general gave him a deeper understanding of his power. At the same time, he also put his power on a high level. Even if the Chihuahua appears, it may not be impossible to fight. With the strength shown by our current cooperation, even the Chihuahua has the power to fight. Ross's eyes flashed brightly, and the idea emerged uncontrollably. If you want to kill or slash, please listen and respect. Flying Squirrel is also a man, his face is expressionless, he said lightly. Even if he is defeated, he will not bow his head to the pirates. You are a man. Ross was a little surprised, glanced at the Flying Squirrel, shook his head and said, but I don't want you to die now, I have something to ask you. If the answer is good, I will let the Navy go. If the answer is bad, then I'm sorry. All the navies here, not a single one. Rhodes's words were full of murderous intent. You. Flying Squirrel's face was furious, and he spat out a mouthful of blood again. After all, he was powerless to continue fighting. Several of his ribs were broken, his back was ripped open, there were countless marks on his shoulders, he was shot twice in the chest, and so on. All of these brought him heavy damage. Although the group of people in front of them suffered a lot of injuries, they were all within the scope of minor injuries, the kind that could recover in a few days, and would not affect their combat effectiveness. But his is different. His injuries will not recover for 10 days and a half months. At present, his combat power is close to zero. You ask. The Flying Squirrel's eyelids were low, and his voice was very hoarse, he said. On the warship. A group of navies were angry, gritted their teeth, held long spears, and aimed at the group of pirates, but they still did not dare to shoot easily. Damn pirates, get out of there. We can't let Lieutenant Flying Squirrel sacrifice in vain. Brothers, are you ready? I'm ready, even if I die, I have to die standing up. Quote. The Navy got excited, his face full of anger. Listening to the Navy's words, Ross's face was calm, and he said lightly, there are still a lot of courageous people under you. It's a pity that they have the courage, but they don't have the corresponding strength. You ask. Flying Squirrel lowered his head in despair, his face gloomy, and said. Chapter 270 _ Your Majesty, can you come out and see me? And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. Flying Squirrel lowered his head in despair, his face gloomy, and said. Okay, then I'll ask. You must never try to fool me. In this case, I can guarantee that you, including your subordinates, will die miserably. Ross grinned and said coldly. In a room on a warship. Li Ang put his arms around Hancock and watched the outbreak and end of the battle ahead. The whole process was in the sight of the two of them. Are we going to start? Hancock's pretty face was calm, he looked at Li Ang, blinked his big eyes, and asked. It doesn't matter to her whether she moves or not. Mainly, Li Ang's opinion is the most important to her. No hurry. Li Ang hugged Hancock, put his head on the other's shoulder, and smiled. Yeah. Hancock blushed slightly, nodded slightly, and said. At the same time. In Li Ang's head, a voice that had not appeared in a long time appeared. Congratulations to the host, turn on the modifier, Navy 6 type plus 999999. Open black lens bracket comprehend the perfect 6 forms close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket breakthrough novice close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket breakthrough entry close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket breakthrough proficiency close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket breakthrough master close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket breakthrough master close black lens bracket. Navy 6. Li Ang was dumbfounded. For a long time, he hadn't heard this familiar voice. The existence of the system will only appear when it is useful. And the rest of the time, there was no sound at all. After so long, he almost forgot the golden finger of the system. But for him, the things that the system can improve now are limited, and his strength is so strong that he doesn't pay much attention to the existence of the system. Unexpectedly, the system suddenly popped up at this moment, which made Li Ang feel relieved. Of course, the Navy's sixth form was not very helpful to him. ... Pirate ship. Ross gradually restrained his arms in arms, walked in front of the flying squirrel, looked down condescendingly, and asked lightly, "I ask you, who is the Chihuahai on the warship?" He wanted to see which Chihuahai it was. If it is the bottom ones, he can bring his companions and fight against each other. Exactly, you can try it out. What is the limit of the strength that they can explode when they cooperate together? No matter how bad it is, you can take the opportunity to escape. Running away is not unfamiliar to them. Well. Glider 0.0 Rat frowned. He didn't expect that the other party would ask such an irrelevant question. However, he thought about it for a while and replied, "The Empress, Hancock." Anyway, this matter is irrelevant. It makes no difference whether he answers or not. The Empress. Rhodes' eyes flashed, a smile appeared on his face, and he said, "The world's most beautiful woman. I have grown up so much, and I have never seen the appearance of an empress. I didn't expect that today I was fortunate enough to finally witness the demeanor of the world's most beautiful woman." Finished talking. He ignored the flying squirrel's expression, walked to the position of the ship's board fence alone, and his line of sight crossed a group of angry Navy, and fixed at a certain position. A long time. With a strong confidence on his face, he smiled and said, "Your Excellency Empress, I have admired your style for a long time. I don't know, can you give me a face and come out to see you?" Chapter 271 He is Li Ang. Boss. Behind Ross, everyone approached and asked cautiously. They are completely puzzled. In this case, why not kill the flying squirrel, and then leave here? If you provoke people from Chihuahai, I am afraid that there will be a lot of trouble. Don't worry, don't you want to take a look at how amazing the appearance of the legendary queen who is the most beautiful woman in the world? Ross raised his head, extremely confident, said. Defeating the flying squirrel easily gave him a lot of confidence. Even if he heard that Chihuahai here is the Empress, he would still be indifferent. He even threatened to meet the Empress. It is rumored that the world's #1 beauty is very curious. Yeah, when it comes to this, I have some expectations. But will she really come out? Suddenly, Ross smiled coldly. Don't come out. Then we have to visit in person. What the boss said is very true. Except for the woman, the rest of the men laughed. Their words, hearing the flying squirrel's ears, made his eyes flash a little ridiculous. These guys, 26, still don't know how to write dead words. It is true that he is a lieutenant general of the headquarters, but compared with the Empress of Chihuahai, his strength is simply not enough. These guys who are looking for their own way, actually dare to provoke those grumpy queens. They just don't know how to live or die. He can already predict that these guys have been turned into stone statues by the Empress. This Empress is not a fuel-efficient lamp. She kills people without blinking an eye. You finally kicked the iron plate. Prepare to wait for death to come. The flying skier laughed secretly in his heart, and looked coldly at the backs of Ross and the others. At the same time, the board of the warship. Many navies were stunned. They still haven't forgotten that in the other direction, the group of navies that have been turned into stone statues have not been released from the state of petrification. Actually, there are people who do not know whether to live or die, and take the initiative to provoke these ancestors. It is really terrible. In the warship, in the room. Li Ang put his arms around Hancock's waist, looking at the confident Rhodes below. He couldn't help shaking his head and laughing. These guys are really bold. Lord Li Ang, let me go out and kill them all. Hancock's beautiful eyes flashed a bit of murderous intent, but his tone was still soft. seeking Li Yang's opinion. She is not a good person, and she doesn't know how much blood is on her hands. Someone dared to provoke the family, and she naturally couldn't turn a blind eye. No, no, no. Li Yang rubbed Hancock's pretty face and said with a smile, how can I let you do it when I'm here? Just be obedient and watch me go out and kill them all. Yeah. Hancock blushed slightly, lowered his head, leaned against Li Yang's chest, and nodded lightly. Someone is going to stand up for themselves. This feeling is really exciting. She was overjoyed. Although she didn't care about the strength of the group of people, when someone was provoked, someone could stand up and stand in front of her. This feeling really liked it very much. Won't you give me a reward? Li Yang took the initiative to stretch his face over and smiled. Boo! Hancock's pretty face was flushed, and after a kiss, he quickly lowered his head. Your wife is really good. Li Yang said with a smile, wiped the red mark on his face, and his mood became very happy. Immediately, he moved his footsteps, turned his head, and walked towards the door. At this time, Hancock's beautiful eyes were a bit shy, and it took a long time to brew up the courage to say a few words in that mosquito-like voice. Old husband. Just wait for me to come back. Li Yang paused, and the corner of his mouth raised a deep arc, said. Chapter 271 he is Li Yang. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. Li Yang paused, and the corner of his mouth raised a deep arc, said. These damned guys, they dare to provoke my wife, they don't know how to live or die. If that's the case, then let them go and completely disappear from this world. There are never few people who seek their own way. Crunch. The door opened. Li Yang stepped out of the room. After walking out of the room, his original smile faded, his face was expressionless, his eyes flashed a little coldly, murderous intent fluctuated, and a strong murderous intent enveloped him. Can Hancock be seen by anyone? Overconfident guy, go to hell. Li Yang's eyes flickered, and he walked out of the room step by step. His figure was also in everyone's sight. Huh. A group of Navy was stunned. They wanted to ask why. From the Empress room, a man walked out. Why, how is it a man? Where is the Empress? Could it be that the bag was dropped? It's impossible. Or, the disguise. No, this man looks familiar. Quote. A group of Navy launched a whispered discussion. Li Yang walked to the fence of the warship step by step, and all the Navy subconsciously moved out of the way, allowing him to gradually appear in the sight of Rhodes and others. Well. Ross frowned, looked at Li Yang coldly, and shouted, who are you? You are not an empress. But why did you come out of her room? After he finished speaking, he looked at the flying squirrel's position. He wondered if the other party deceived him. But the flying squirrel's face at the moment was also stiff, and his face was dull. Even he can't explain. Here, why, can see the figure of this person. Why, this person, came out of the Empress's room. In an instant, the flying squirrel's pupils shrank, and there was a hint of an answer in his heart. Who am I? That's a good question. Li Yang's eyes narrowed slightly, and with a small smile, he said slowly, but, I just won't tell you, you can guess for yourself who I am. 997. Looking for death. Ross was furious and roared. He couldn't bear it. Someone dared to be so presumptuous in front of him. Could it be that the other party didn't see that they even defeated the flying squirrel easily? He looks familiar. A woman thought for a moment and whispered. Gradually. Her eyes gradually enlarged, her throat was dry, her pink lips trembled, and she couldn't hide the expression of fear that appeared on her beautiful face. Looks like you already know who he is. The flying squirrel looked at the change in the woman's expression, laughed loudly, and said. He didn't even think that, unexpectedly, this god of killing was brought out. However, these pirates in front of them are guilty. This person was brought out. It seems that the chances of this group of pirates surviving are close to zero. Who is he? Ross frowned, looked at the woman beside him, and asked, "What's the matter with you?" Boss, now, we're all done." The woman slumped on the ground, her face pale and shivering. Her appearance made Rhodes and the rest of the crew puzzled, and continued to ask, "No one in this world can kill us 100%. Why do you show such an expression?" He is Li Ang." The woman swallowed her saliva, her eyes couldn't hide a look of fear, and said. Chapter 272-2 minutes. "He's not an empress, his name is Li Ang, he is Li Ang." The woman was a little crazy, her eyes were full of panic, and she said, "Li Ang, who can suppress the naval headquarters, how could he appear here? This is impossible." Li Ang. These two words moved everyone present. Ross froze, his confident smile stopped abruptly, looking at the man walking step by step in front of him, a sense of fear in his heart was infinitely magnified. He is the legendary one, Li Ang. Rhodes' lips trembled, his expression was full of fear, and his heart was tumbling. If it really is that Li Ang, then their troubles are too great. "Are you all right?" Li Ang glanced at the flying squirrel's position and said lightly. "Lord Li Ang, why are you here?" Flying Squirrel showed a wry smile and couldn't help asking. "My family Hancock has gone to sea. Of course, as her husband, I will naturally be accompanied. Do you have any opinion?" Li Ang said bluntly with a calm face. "Don't dare." Flying Squirrel paused in his heart, lowered his head, and said. "This is a terrifying figure that even the warring states marshals dared not provoke. He is just a lieutenant general of the headquarters, and if he provokes Li Ang, there will be only a dead end. Let your people carry you back." After Li Ang finished speaking, he fixed his eyes on Rhodes and other 10 people in front of him. With a hint of interest, he smiled and said, "How are you, all emerging pirates? Are you really Li Ang?" Ross couldn't help but take a half step back, took a deep breath, and said. "There is no second person in this world who dares to use this name," Li Ang said with confidence in himself. An instant, Ross's throat was dry, and he quickly explained, "Lord Li Ang, we didn't know you were here. I'm bothering you, we'll leave now." He looked at everyone with his eyes, and looked terrified, and was preparing to leave here quickly. However, how could Li Ang let them go away so easily? Saying that these guys they shouldn't ask to see Hancock. Hancock, whoever wants to see it. Moreover, the tone of these people made Li Ang very uncomfortable. He was upset, but he was going to die. "Wait." Li Ang spoke out to stop the opponent's actions. Under his words, Rhodes and others had to stop, their bodies were stiff, and they dared not face Li Ang's gaze. Ross held his head, stood up, and asked in a low voice, "Lord Li Ang, do you have any other orders? You want to leave so easily?" The corners of Li Ang's mouth twitched into an arc, his eyes flickered, and he had a plan. "I don't know, how can you let us go, my lord?" Ross is completely without the courage to fight at this moment. The person in front of him is the famous Li Ang. Even if he has no self-knowledge, he would not dare to fight against such a terrifying person. Even the general did not dare to be presumptuous in front of this one. What's more, he is a pirate with a bounty of 200 million berries, although he still carries a group of pirates, but if a fight really breaks out, they will be killed in an instant. This point, Rhodes can be sure of. Therefore, he had to adjust his posture to the lowest level and pray for Li Ang's forgiveness. This picture, presented in the eyes of many navies on the warship, finally allowed them to spread the anger in their hearts. Chapter 272-2 minutes. This picture, presented in the eyes of many navies on the warship, finally allowed them to spread the anger in their hearts. This group of damn pirates finally saw the appearance of their soft bones. In front of Lord Li Ang, these pirates are simply not enough to see. So relieved, these arrogant guys also have this day. Quote. Many navies have finally understood what strength means in this sea area. Just like Liang, who has terrifying strength, not only can he deter the navy, but even these pirates are so frightened that they don't dare to act rashly. This is the benefit of strength. With strength, in any corner, there will be no trouble. Hurry up and send Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel for treatment. A pirate helped the Flying Squirrel and hurriedly said. Flying Squirrel shook his head, looked at Liang and the others in front, and said firmly, "No need, I can't die from this injury. I want to see the final result of these pirates." Okay. The Navy soldiers nodded helplessly. As it happened, they also wanted to see what the consequences of this group of pirates would be. Provoking Liang is no small matter. The other side. Under Liang's gaze, Rhodes and other 10 people, none of them dared to look up, looked down at the devastated shipboard, and said nothing. Their hearts were heavy and depressed. Unexpectedly, it was so unfortunate to encounter a terrifying god of killing, Liang, here. All this is because Rhodes is the cheapest, otherwise, Liang would not appear at all. Now Rhodes is full of remorse. If it weren't for his talkativeness, I'm afraid that what's going on at the moment would not happen at all. It's all because he is too arrogant. Okay, now Liang is drawn, how does it end? Diaresis, I'll give you a way to live. Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. Thank you, Mr. Liang. Ross bowed quickly, looking very excited, said. The 9 people standing behind him were also excited. They don't want to die. If Liang doesn't let them go, the chance of them surviving is close to 0. Well, this ship, I'll let you sail for 2 minutes. Liang pointed to the boat under his feet and said slowly, in 2 minutes, I will launch an attack. If you are hit, you can only blame you for being unlucky. In 2 minutes, better not. I can promise you that I will only do it once. In 2 minutes, I will stand on the spot and do it once. After that, whether you live or die has nothing to do with me. Liang looked at the 10 people in front of him and gave them the last chance to survive. This is also the only chance for Rhodes and others to survive. If you don't gamble, it's even easier. Liang started now, they could not have the possibility of surviving. 2 minutes. Rhodes' face was heavy, his eyes twinkled, he gritted his teeth, and said, okay, I bet. Anyway, he didn't think that if he didn't gamble, Liang would let them go. Better yet, give it a go. Coincidentally, in 2 minutes, he could sail over 1,000-meter sea. No matter how strong Liang is, it is impossible to kill people across thousands of meters, right? In this regard, Rhodes still has a lot of confidence in his heart. As long as they dodged a blow and survived for 2 minutes, they could survive. In any case, these 2 minutes are very important. The ship must be sailed to a farther position to prevent Liang's power from spreading too widely. Chapter 273 Runaway, Run away. Just 2 minutes. Liang's eyes flickered, and there was a touch of interest on his face. He is also not 100% sure of killing everyone on the other side, but isn't that more interesting? If it is a mortal situation, then there is no such sense of expectation. A normal ship sails for 2 minutes, and it is impossible to escape the line of sight. As long as it's still within sight, so he doesn't have to worry at all. He can't walk, standing in place to attack, thousands of meters away, it's not a problem. It just so happened that he could also try it out, urging the attack with all his strength, and how tyrannical power he could burst out. I hope that these guys in front of me can go further, which is more challenging. Run away, run hard, run away from my sight. A smile appeared on Liang's face, thinking to himself. Subsequently, he kicked his feet and returned to the warship. In his sight, on the devastated pirate ship in front of him, Ross and others are also ready to go. Boss. The only female pirate was a little frightened and asked in a low voice, can we escape? Don't worry. Rhodes took a deep breath, patted his chest and assured, in 2 minutes, we can travel 1,000 meters away. At that time, not even a shadow will be seen. It is impossible for him to kill 637 US. of. No matter how strong Liang is, he is still a person. In this world, no one can accurately destroy a ship thousands of meters away. I can guarantee this, you can rest assured. Next, the most important thing is that we must use 2 minutes to make the distance between the ship and the warship. In this way, our chances of survival will also be greater. After finishing speaking, Ross looked at the 9 people in front of him and said, "Strength." Yeah. The crowd nodded. Everyone's lives are tied together. If they can't escape Liang's attack range, then all of them will die. Not just one person, but all of them will be killed. The entire ship will also be directly destroyed. In this case, they can only hold a group and do everything they can to escape. Okay, folks, get ready. Ross looked at the damaged ship after the battle with the flying squirrel, feeling very depressed. Although he had great confidence, he was still a little scared. Encourage death. No matter how much confidence you have, you will inevitably feel panic. All in all, you must make good use of these 2 minutes. These 2 minutes decide their life and death. When I finished counting 3 seconds, the time started to count. Liang's voice echoed around them. Not only him, but the surrounding navies are also watching this game with nervous expressions. 2 minutes, according to the speed of the warship and the distance of 1 kilometer, it's easy. A navy was slightly worried, looking at the pirate in front of him, gritted his teeth, and said bitterly, "If these pirates are allowed to escape, it is bound to bring a lot of trouble to the next navy." However, they did not dare to speak to Liang without authorization. No one can order Liang, and no one can change Liang's original plan. As the navy, they deeply know how terrifying Liang is. Therefore, under such circumstances, daring to provoke Liang would undoubtedly lead to death. 2 minutes. The flying squirrel supported the fence, narrowed his eyes slightly, took a deep breath, and said. He was thinking about how far he could travel in 2 minutes. Then, based on his own strength, he can judge how far he can break out the effective distance of the attack. Finally, he came to a conclusion. 2 minutes, sailing kilometers, conservative estimates. And the attack range that he can maintain an effective distance is only a pitiful 20 meters. 10 times the difference. Moreover, still at sea, the sea will effectively block the power of the attack. Chapter 273_Runaway, Runaway. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. Moreover, still at sea, the sea will effectively block the power of the attack. The original attack range of 20 meters on land can only be maintained at most 10 meters on the sea, and the strength will be weakened by half. Therefore, if the flying squirt wants to kill the enemy at a distance of 1,000 meters, his attack power must be at least 100 times higher. 100 times is a numerical theory. Of course, in reality, it is impossible to compare with absolute number theory. The longer the sustained range of the attack, the greater the power required, and this is not just a simple doubling CGAC increment. The resistance of the seawater is very large. If you want to maintain an effective attack range of 1 kilometer in the sea, there should be no such person in this world. Unless it is the kind of devil fruit capable person who can use the coverage bombing attack to destroy an island, can such a huge attack range be achieved. However, Liang is not capable. His strongest point is his domineering power and his swordsmanship. This point, the flying squirrel, is quite clear. According to rumors, Mahawk, the world's largest swordsman, had the longest attack range and could only be kept at a position of 120 meters. If it is longer, the strength will be weakened to dozens or hundreds of times, and the original lethality can no longer be maintained. This record was tested on land. Today's environment is the sea. Liang, can you do it? The flying squirrel's eyes flickered, and his gaze was fixed on Liang's body, thinking in his heart. If he can do it, he can't imagine how terrifying the opponent's strength is. At this time, Li Ang stood on the board of the warship, and the surrounding navy pushed aside an open space, leaving him to stand here alone, forming a territory of his own. "You guys, are you ready?" Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. "Anytime." Ross looked at Li Ang, his face was heavy, and he nodded lowly, said, "Well, I'm going to start counting." Li Ang nodded lightly, opened his mouth slowly, and said, 3, 2, 1, go. The words just fell. Ross immediately waved the wood pulp and shouted loudly, "Give me more effort, and those who don't want to die, I have more effort." This is a very ordinary sailboat, only downwind. If the wind is not favorable, then they can only generate power by themselves to keep the ship sailing. Not all boats have the capability of propellers. If he knew that there were such twists and turns today, what would Rhodes say? He would go bankrupt, and he would have to build a boat that could sail the fastest. It's a pity that now he, even if he regrets it, is useless. It's all for Lao Su's life. Ross gritted his teeth, and his hands kept sliding the wood pulp. The whole ship gradually sailed at a fast speed, and in a blink of an eye, it left the area around the warship. All of a sudden, he advanced about 50 meters. From the warship, only a vague shadow of a ship could be seen. This is only 50 meters away. If it is further away, it is really impossible to grasp the goal. Many navies looked at Li Ang, who was indifferent, and thought to themselves, "Really, can you kill each other at such a long distance?" However, you can't even see the target. The flying squirrel was also a little uneasy, not knowing what to think about. On the other hand, Li Ang, with a calm expression, watched the departure of the pirate ship lightly, without any disturbance. He was counting the passage of time. 2 minutes is neither long nor short. 1, 2, 3. Chapter 274 Lend you a knife. On the warship. A group of Navy watched the starry sky pirates flee from their eyes, and their eyes were fixed on Li Ang's body, with a strange expression. Due to Li Ang's terrifying strength, they dared not speak. However, they still can't believe that one person can kill people from thousands of meters away. Even the target has become a black spot as small as an ant. No matter how powerful a person is, I am afraid that he will not be able to accurately aim, right? Unless it's a blanket bombing attack. 39. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, his face was calm and counting. 2 minutes, no more, no less, and when the time is up, he will start immediately. Front. After a battle, the sailing ship, which became somewhat broken, sailed at sea. On board. Ross looked at the warship that could only capture a black spot behind him, and was slightly relieved, but he still opened his mouth and ordered, "Don't be careless, continue to slide." At this time, they were already 200 meters away from the warship. The warship turned into a black spot and did not pursue them at all. This made Rhodes sigh heavily and said, "He didn't break his promise. In 2 minutes, we can completely escape from here. Everyone, work harder." "Yes, boss." The other 9 nodded quickly. In order to survive, they were naturally scrambling to slide the ship. A breeze came in and moved the sails in exactly the direction they were going to leave. "God is helping us." Ross was excited, and seeing the downwind of the ship, he couldn't help but have an excited expression on his face. Sailing downwind, their speed will naturally increase a lot. Moreover, at this time, even if they don't slide, there is no big problem. Whoa! The seawater opened to both sides, and the entire ship was unable to capture the shadow of the warship, and it was close to a distance of 500 meters from the warship. Sailing downwind, really fast enough. The corners of Ross's mouth were slightly upturned, and he said with a loud laugh. The woman also showed a smile and said, "Boss, we are now 500 meters away, and less than a minute has passed. Now, no matter how strong Li Ang is, it can't help us." "All right. Yeah, at such a distance, it is undoubtedly impossible for him to hit us accurately while standing still." Finally, I got out of danger from the tiger's mouth. I didn't expect to encounter a monster like Liang. It's really unfortunate. There is still 1 minute left. In order to prevent accidents, we should sail for a longer distance as soon as possible. Not afraid of 10,000, just in case. Quote. The crowd spoke slowly. Their lives are at stake, and they must proceed with caution. Although, they didn't think that Liang could kill them at such a long distance. But when it comes to their own safety, they have to be cautious. Even if there is a small chance, they must face it seriously, take it seriously, and prevent any loopholes from appearing and causing them to die. Everyone is very cautious. That's why they were not only surrounded and suppressed by the navy, but even the generals were dispatched, but they were never caught. It is precisely because they are vigilant by nature that they will keep their backhand every time, just in case. Yes, it is necessary to sail further distances. Ross nodded solemnly and agreed. Seeing the sea rising from the sea, his expression became particularly calm. The original fear has gradually subsided. He threw away the wood pulp on his hand, and now that the wind is down, he no longer has to worry about sailing. Chapter 274 Lend you a knife. He threw away the wood pulp on his hand, and now that the wind is down, he no longer has to worry about sailing. He stood on the board of the ship and looked back at the direction of the warship behind him. I don't know when, the warship still has a looming black spot left, separated by a distance of 600 or 700 meters, and there is still some fog on the sea to block it. Only vague black dots can be captured, but no object can be seen. This distance is already quite safe. Rhodes said with a smile and full of confidence. 2 minutes passed in a flash. On board. Ross narrowed his eyes slightly, looked at the warship that had disappeared behind him, and laughed loudly. We finally escaped. Don't worry about being killed. It's impossible for a god to do it at such a long distance. Boss, where are we going next? The woman couldn't help looking at Ross and asked. Everyone's face has a deep smile, laughs, and is talking excitedly. This Liang's confidence is too great, he dares to give us 2 minutes. Let alone 2 minutes, even if it is 1 minute, he can't see our shadow. At this distance, does he want to attack us? Or stay put? This can only be a joke. 0 katakana middle dot katakana middle dot katakana middle dot katakana middle dot ask for flowers 0 katakana middle dot katakana middle dot. No, but it was because he was too confident that he gave us a chance to escape. Otherwise, if we were to collide with him head-on, we would not be able to kill this monster type of enemy. Quote. Okay, let's get out of here. If he doesn't speak anything and chases after him, then we're done. The speed of that warship is much higher than that of our broken ship. Agreed. Quote. Ross made up his mind secretly that after going back this time, he will customize a high-end boat no matter what. At the very least, the speed must be fast. Celebrate our close call, cheers. A group of pirates even opened the barrels of wine and laughed wildly. 0. They have already started a carnival. On the warship. 2 minutes have passed. Liang's eyes flickered, his face was calm, and he smiled. He stared at the sea in front of him, and in the field of vision of all navies, there was no trace of the black pirate ship. However, in Liang's eyes, he could clearly see a ship, just 1,000 meters away in the sea. On the board, one by one pirates are in a carnival. Immediately, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a meaningful smile. Are you happy too early? Lord Liang, can you do it? Many navies looked at Liang's back and thought to themselves. It's not that they don't believe in Liang's strength. Liang's reputation is well known, and his strength is naturally unquestionable. But now, even seeing the shadow of the enemy, how can we fight? The flying squirrel supported the fence and looked at Liang, wanting to know what the other party would do. He himself has been unable to capture the traces of the group of pirates. If the group of pirates were allowed to leave like this, he would be in a very uncomfortable mood. After all, he was someone who was severely injured by the other party, so he would be more or less resentful in his heart. How about lend me your knife for me? Li Ang glanced at a Navy soldier beside him and said lightly. Ah. The soldier was obviously startled, somewhat inexplicable, the corners of his mouth were trembling, and he said in a panic, Lord Li Ang, please use it. After he finished speaking, he hurriedly handed the blade around his waist to Li Ang with a very cautious expression. Chapter 275_/across the kilometer. This is Li Ang. The Navy soldier lowered his head and looked particularly excited. His own saber was used by the legendary Li Ang. This is a supreme honor, and for a swordsman, it is absolutely exhilarating to let such a terrifying great swordsman use his own saber. Around him, a group of Navy cast envious glances at him. Among them, many soldiers who like to use knives, one by one, can't wait to replace each other. Thanks. Li Ang held the blade and smiled faintly. Immediately, the soldier shook his head hurriedly and said in fear, Lord Li Ang is very polite. It is an honor to be able to let you use the weapon below. Li Ang did not speak, his eyes were fixed on the sea in front of him, his face expressionless. At the same time, the eyes of the people around were fixed on Li Ang. After all, can he kill each other at a distance of 1,000 meters? This is a question that puzzles everyone. The distance of 1,000 meters, even the enemy can't see it, can it really kill the opponent? No one knows, but the confidence in my heart plummets. Even Li Ang can't do it. A Navy said weakly. No one answered, and they focused on Li Ang. Silence. The atmosphere became extremely silent. Flying Squirrel also looked at 113 Li Ang, looking forward to what the other party would do. Anyway, if it was him, there was nothing he could do. His attack range was not wide in the first place, and being able to kill an enemy at a distance of 20 meters in the sea was already considered a ruthless record. Not to mention the distance of thousands of meters, this is more difficult for him than reaching the sky. In the room, by the window, Hancock's beautiful eyes looked at Li Ang's back, madly. In fact, she didn't pay attention to Li Ang's movements. She just wanted to quietly watch the back figure that attracted her, and fell into silence. It was this back that gave her a sense of security. Even as the Empress, she is willing to become a little woman and accompany this back. I don't know, can it be successful? The distance of 1 kilometer. Hancock murmured softly, his red lips slightly parted, drawing an arc. Immediately, her delicate face, instantly glamorous and indescribable, made people intoxicated. The position of the front end of the warship. Li Ang held an ordinary knife, and his expression showed no waves. In his line of sight, he could see that the 10 pirates on the pirate ship were all reveling to their hearts, already thinking that they would survive in a desperate situation. The distance is about 1,200 meters. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly and said lightly. At this distance, he doesn't know if he can hit it, but he can give it a try. Holding an ordinary blade, he did not move his line of sight, and slowly raised his right hand holding the hilt. Are you going to make a move? Many navies' throats were dry and whispered. Although they couldn't believe it, they still wanted to see the results. Killing people thousands of meters apart is really scary. Cut. Li Ang's face was calm, urging the mighty power in his body to condense in the blade. Buzz. A terrifying airflow turned and swept the audience. Okay, what a terrifying sword energy. The surrounding navy was stunned, and some people even slumped on the ground with their legs weak. This breath really made them a little hard to stop. Not to mention them, even the Flying Squirrel, who is the Lieutenant General of the headquarters, is somewhat unbearable. If it is not for the fence with both hands, I am afraid that he will kneel down and lose face in front of his subordinates. Chapter 275_/across a kilometer. Not to mention them, even the Flying Squirrel, who is the Lieutenant General of the headquarters, is somewhat unbearable. If it is not for the fence with both hands, I am afraid that he will kneel down and lose face in front of his subordinates. In today's world, the world's largest swordsman, Flying Squirrel, looked solemn and said solemnly, "A brand new, world's #1 swordsman who is more powerful than Hawkeye Mahawk is right in front of him. It is undeniable that the opponent's strength is naturally very terrifying. Next, it's time to face the results. It is about to be revealed that it is possible to kill people at a distance of thousands of meters. Go ahead." Li Ang slowly lowered the blade, and a sharp slash was forced out from the tip of the blade. "Call out." The bright light flashed away. Everyone can only capture the dazzling light, and after returning to God bid, not even the shadow can be seen. This speed is almost too fast to be captured by the naked eye. The sharp slash, as if piercing the air, slammed into the sea swiftly. So strong. The Navy swallowed and lost his voice. Whoa! The sea splashed up, and the slash hit the sea, cutting a deep gap in the sea. In addition, they shuddered when they felt the power aura just now. Just now, when Li Ang attacked, they only felt the trembling feeling of a prehistoric beast passing by. The horror is terrifying, and the lips are trembling. Maybe, it's really possible. The rest of the Navy's original beliefs were shaken. If it is such a terrifying attack, it is really possible to kill the opponent. Boom! The sea was rough, and the water splashed up, threw it on the board, dripped on a person's shoulder, and dyed the person's hair wet. But in this case, no one has paid attention to these. Every gaze was fixed on the dazzling slash on the sea surface, attracted by life and life, unable to extricate himself, and even more unable to look away. Next. With a smile, Li Ang threw the knife back to the Navy. Immediately, he took a step and was about to leave. The Navy looked stunned, and he blurted out, "Lord Li Ang, don't you take a look at the results? It's not necessary anymore." Li Ang left everyone with a back, and gradually disappeared in the position of the ship's board. At this time, everyone turned their eyes back to the sea. That slash also gradually turned into a spot of light, getting smaller and smaller. Is there no way to do such a terrifying attack? Before launching this attack, I'm afraid that Lord Li Ang had already anticipated it. So, it's better to ignore it. It was a failed attack anyway. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, what do you think? The rest of the people looked at the Flying Squirrel and asked in a low voice. Not sure. Flying Squirrel shook his head directly, he really did not know the final result. I still let those pirates run away. A Navy gritted his teeth and said with a sigh. Just now, it was obvious that they could be killed. It's a pity that Lord Li Ang was too confident. Now, he really sent them away in vain. Don't talk nonsense, Mr. Li Ang is not obliged to kill pirates for us. To help us and avoid being killed by pirates is already the best of humanity. That being said, the mood is always low. A group of Navy sighed and started talking. Tell the helmsman to have a look at the sea ahead. Flying Squirrel frowned, always feeling that things shouldn't be so simple. He immediately ordered the helmsman to change the direction of sailing. Chapter 276 _ Cut off the sea. Lieutenant Flying Squirrel, do you mean, chase? Some Navy did not know why, could not help but ask. Look at the final result. The Flying Squirrel was expressionless and shook his head. Immediately, all the navies understood, but they were not optimistic about what happened to Li Ang this time. However, since the Flying Squirrel is a lieutenant general, they do not dare to refute it at will. Soon, the helmsman changed the direction of sailing according to the Flying Squirrel's order, and rushed to the route that the pirate ship escaped just now, sailing all the way. Anyway, it won't take long, so what does it matter? Ahahaha, this guy Li Ang is really too confident. However, without his confidence, how could we easily escape? Ross held a wine glass. Lang Lang smiled. The woman also took a sip of red wine and said with a smile, the boss is still wise. The boss is wise and has won a chance for us. This bet is really sending us away for nothing. But it also shows from the side that Liang's blind self-confidence. Looking at it this way, he is not as scary as the rumors say. Could it be that the rumors are all fake? Ross shook his head and said solemnly, "Don't talk nonsense, Liang's strength is recognized as terrifying. Only this time, he really cares about it, so he let us leave here. If there is a head-on collision, I can guarantee that in less than 10 seconds, all of us will be killed. Even if we cooperate perfectly, it is useless to encounter such absolute power." "Boss, are you exaggerating? Is this power really that strong?" The pirate holding a sniper rifle pouted and said. "He wears a pair of glasses and sniper eyes, which are convenient for targeting enemies when gathering. It's not that I'm exaggerating, it's that it's recognized at sea." Rhodes shook his head and said earnestly, "Let's forget about this. In short, we won't think about revenge in the future. This matter is too serious. If we are not careful, we will all die. But fortunately, we have successfully escaped." Speaking of which, Rhodes couldn't hide his joy. "That's right, Liang let us go by himself." The rest of the people laughed and said. At this time, the woman holding a wine glass and drinking red wine looked at a small spot of light in front of her with some doubts. She moved her footsteps and walked forward, wanting to take a closer look. "What's the matter with you?" Ross was a little puzzled and asked. "On the sea, it seems that something is constantly approaching." The woman's brows were furrowed, and her slightly delicate face flashed a bit of suspicion. "A sea king?" The rest of the people opened their mouths and asked. "No, it's a ball of light that is constantly approaching our position." The woman shook her hair and said. "Well." Ross's face changed slightly, he quickly pushed the woman away, looked at the sea in front of him, his mouth moved slightly, and said, "Everything is ready, this, very likely, is the attack from Liang." "Is it really here?" Everyone was stunned, and their faces were full of astonishment. Whoa! The water fluttered, and the calm sea rippled with ripples. The waves were rough and the whole ship shook. Not good. Ross's face changed greatly, and he lost his voice. "It's here, actually, it's really here. It is self-evident how terrifying the power of an attack that can make the sea boil." He could never have imagined that Liang's attack actually penetrated the distance of 1,000 meters and was attacking their location. The speed is astounding. At first, what he saw was just a spot of light, but now, what he saw was the cracked waves. Chapter 276 cut off the sea. At first, what he saw was just a spot of light, but now, what he saw was the cracked waves. What's more, that incomparably bright light is approaching rapidly. In a blink of an eye, it was already close to the area of 50 meters. Ross and the others were shocked, their lips were hairy, and they were 50 meters apart. They could all feel that the terrifying aura was quickly shrouded in. Incredible. This is an attack launched from thousands of meters away. Unexpectedly, after being separated by thousands of meters, after encountering the resistance of the sea, it still possesses such a violent power. It's impossible. The wine glass in the woman's hand fell and shattered to the ground. Her pink lips were slightly open, and her whole face was terrified. Why? Why is it so far away, still able to attack? This is impossible. Is Liang's strength so terrifying? No, get out of here. Ross's eyes were terrified and he shouted loudly. However, any of his words seemed pale and powerless at this moment. It is impossible for the ship to leave the direction casually, and it can only swing slightly, but it is impossible to avoid this extremely wide coverage attack in front of him. Whoa! A deep crack opened in the sea. It can be seen that the entire sea is cut in half, which is truly breathtaking. But in the eyes of Rhodes and others, this is undoubtedly the reminder of the god of death. Even the sea was cut off. Ross's lips trembled, looking at the cracked sea with despair in his heart. There is no hope. Even the sea was cut off. What did they use to stop it? Zero. At this moment, he realized how ridiculous the thoughts just now were. This kind of terrifying power is not to mention 1,000 meters, even if it is 2,000 or 3,000 meters away, he can't stop it. It's over, we're all over. Many pirates were in despair, kneeling on the board, and could only watch helplessly. The slashing attack from the front came, and the splashing seawater fell on their shoulders, a cold touch. Sudden. A sea king popped out of his head. The huge eyes looked at the wrecked ship in front of him, and were about to open their fangs. Puff. In an instant, its body was cut in half, just like cutting tofu, without hindrance. The blood overflowed, dyeing the sea red, and the bloody smell gradually spread. No, I'm not reconciled, I regret it. Ross's eyes were covered by the bright light, he gritted his teeth, roared, and shouted. He held the blade, ready to resist. Just when he raised the blade, his legs weakened and he fell to the ground, his hands were unable to support him, and his face was full of horror. He didn't even have the courage. Boom. A sharp slash slashed the sea and hit the tattered ship. In an instant, the ship was cut in two. The terrible cutting force and the aftermath caused the ship to crack open, turning into small pieces of wood chips and falling on the sea. And everyone on the ship, under this attack, all turned into powder and disappeared in this world, without any exception. They were killed on the spot, and they didn't even leave their bodies behind. Chapter 277 actually hit it. After destroying the ship and Rhodes and others on the ship, this slashing slash still did not stop, and swiftly attacked the distant sea area. A macroscopic landscape, presented in the sight of people. The sea was cut off with a knife. It is divided into two sea areas on the left and right, and the sea water cannot heal quickly, so people can see that a gap of thousands of meters, or even thousands of meters, appears here. Boom. After traversing the position of about 3 kilometers, the slash hit an uninhabited desert island, causing a huge amount of damage, and the sound was loud and resounding through the sky. This deserted island was chopped in half in an instant, split from the middle, divided into left and right sides, and gradually widened the distance along with the current. The picture is terrifying. A slash traversed a distance of 3 kilometers, and it still possesses such terrifying power, it is unbelievable. 2-3-6-0s, know that the sea has resistance. Any attack will continue to weaken its own strength with the passage of distance. But 3 kilometers apart, they cut through the sea all the way, and still smashed an uninhabited deserted island in half. Such terrifying power is no longer within the range that people can accept. The power of terror is beyond people's imagination. No one can imagine what kind of picture a slash can have the power to destroy an island 3 kilometers away. Whoa! The sea current fluttered, gradually healing the wound just now. The crack that originally appeared had a width of about 5 meters, and as it continued to heal, the width was rapidly decreasing. 4 meters. 3 meters. At this time, a huge warship sailed according to this clear crack. On board, numerous navies looked at the severed sea all the way, and their faces were full of fear. This time, they were not sure whether the people on that pirate ship were dead or alive. Actually, there are still traces left across the thousands of meters. This shows that the power of this slash is far more than that. They all underestimated Li Ang's strength. Too strong. A navy stared blankly at the cracks on the sea and couldn't help trembling. The rest of the navy looked sluggish and stayed in place stiffly. Including the flying squirrel, he watched the cracks all the way and chased over. He naturally knew how tyrannical the power contained in this slash could bring such a huge crack to the sea. Lord Li Ang, it really is, it can be called a monster. The world's greatest swordsman is well deserved. Even Hawkeye can't match this level. It's unacceptable that they bring such enormous power apart by thousands of meters. And, look, this crack isn't over yet. Quote. Everyone was talking, seeing the cracks in front of them still exist. Their hearts skipped a beat, they couldn't get out of here in a short time, their eyes stared blankly at the picture in front of them. Stop. The flying skier took a deep breath, his throat was dry, he waved his hand and commanded. Warship gradually stopped. He looked around and whispered to himself, "If you guessed correctly, the place where the ship stopped just now should be this area. But, why can't I find any traces?" Flying Squirrel frowned, looking at the huge crack beside him, unable to speak for a long time. This group of pirates, I'm afraid, really got hit. A slash separated by a kilometer directly penetrated the sea, and the pirate ship disappeared without a trace. It stands to reason that if it was hit from the front, the ship could not stop this terrifying slash at all. Therefore, the Flying Squirrel can be sure that if the pirate ship is hit, the people on board will never survive. Chapter 277 actually hit it. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. Therefore, the Flying Squirrel can be sure that if the pirate ship is hit, the people on board will never survive. And the rift continues. The Flying Squirrel was terrified and his scalp was numb. He glanced at it, and the cracks in the sea continued from here, as far as the eye could see, far more than 1,000 meters. I'm afraid, conservative estimates, at least 2 kilometers of the sea have been cut off. What kind of power this is, it is not an exaggeration to call it the power of God. After being in the Navy for so many years, it was the first time that the Flying Squirrel saw such a terrifying power in his sight. Hard to accept. Lieutenant Flying Squirrel, at sea, there are wrecks. Suddenly, a Navy's words pulled back the Flying Squirrel's thoughts. Following the Navy's line of sight, as expected, he saw pieces of wood chips floating on the sea, not yet sinking to the bottom of the sea. The sea was rippling, and the sawdust echoed around, moving with the wind. This scene made all the Navy present fall into silence. Silence. Silent. As that ship destroyed. A Navy's lips trembled and he could not help asking weakly. In fact, almost everyone has the answer in their hearts. However, this answer made them unbelievable and unacceptable. Thousands of meters apart, even the ship can't see the shadow, but Liang can actually destroy the ship and kill all the pirates on board. This is quite scary. Not only the accuracy, but also the destructive power is very terrifying. The sea has been cut off, and it is conceivable how strong the power contained in this slash is. Some navies couldn't help but think that if the target of this slash was their warship, what would the result be? Suddenly, they shuddered, and their spines were wet with cold sweat. As a result, their entire warship would sink to the bottom of the sea. Everyone on board will die on the spot. Actually, it's really hit. The corner of the Flying Squirrel's mouth moved slightly, and his expression was full of horror. He looked at a bone fragment that was floating, and the waves in his heart were tumbling, and he was so shocked that it was hard to accept. So it seems. The pirate ship has really been wiped out, leaving this pile of debris floating on the sea. And the pirates on the ship, without exception, were all killed. Even the corpse was mutilated. 1.2 was destroyed in an instant, turned into powder, and what was left was only some scattered parts such as hair strands, broken bones and so on. Starting today, the Starry Sky pirates will be removed from the sea. Whoa! The seawater fluttered and healed gradually, and the place where it had been cut off gradually disappeared. However, neither the Flying Squirrel nor the Navy present could forget the scene they saw today, which was too frightening and unheard of. Who would have thought that thousands of meters apart, they can kill people in the air? This is Liang's true strength. The flying skier trembled in his heart, thinking so. He believes that in the future, the naval headquarters will put Liang's status at a higher level, and must avoid disputes with the other party. Otherwise, this slash would come to the Navy headquarters, and the result would be unimaginable. I'm afraid, the naval headquarters will be cut in two. Chapter 278-Advanced City. Sunny. The golden light flickered on the sea, and it looked like a pile of golden mountains from a distance, which was a bit dazzling. A warship is sailing on the sea, the water on both sides is pushed aside, the sound of crashing, coupled with this quiet atmosphere, is really a pleasant time. On board. A navy is gnashing his teeth in training. The one in the lead was naturally the flying squirrel who had recovered most of his injuries. Don't be lazy. The result of being lazy is like the group of pirates who disappeared. As a navy, we must be prepared to be buried in the sea at any time. Strength is essential. Flying Squirrel's face was calm, and his words were full of majesty. He shuddered when he recalled the scene a few days ago. Therefore, he did not dare to express any complaints about Li Ang who suddenly appeared on the boat. If he angered the other party, wouldn't he be miserable? Just like that group of pirates, they don't even know how to die. Yes, Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel. Many navies shouted loudly, with a firm expression. Since that day, when the Flying Squirrel chose to fight alone in order to protect them, they have been deeply impressed by their hearts. For Flying Squirrel's orders, they obey 100%. 18. This is also the charm of the Flying Squirrel itself. During the training, the Flying Squirrel's eyes would look at a room from time to time. His face was a little unnatural, and his eyes could not flash a bit of panic on time. I don't know, what exactly is this adult for? However, he also has no ability to stop. Not to mention him, even if the world government wants to stop Li Ang's every move, it is unrealistic. Marshal of the Warring States said, the name changes. But, how can it be so simple? I am here, but I don't even dare to breathe heavily. I am afraid that I will provoke the other party. The Flying Squirrel was bitter in his heart, shook his head and sighed. It's not that he didn't look for Warring States, but the answer that Warring States gave him was basically as if he hadn't given it, and it was useless at all. Come to think of it, the Warring States period was also because he was too afraid of Li Ang, so he didn't take any measures. At this time, in the room, the sunlight penetrated from the window and shone on the floor. A golden light spot appeared on the clean floor. As the warship moved, its position moved a little bit like a snail. Unupholstered. Li Ang was holding Hancock with a smile, staring at Hancock's delicate face, unblinking, very serious, and extremely focused. Huh. Hancock's long eyelashes fluttered and he opened his eyes. At first glance, she saw Li Ang, and felt the warmth. Her whole body could not help shrinking into Li Ang's arms like a kitten. How long has it been? Hancock's red lips moved slightly, and he asked in confusion. The whole process counts as strength, probably, it's nearly 6 days. Li Ang rubbed Hancock's hair, sniffed the fragrance of the other party's body up close, and replied with a smile. It's been 6 days. If you want to come, you should have arrived at your destination soon. Hancock stretched his hands, and his slender jade arms were exposed to the eyes, with a bit of ruddy, reddish-white and jade-like skin, with an extraordinary beauty. She raised her legs slightly, and the long, white jade legs were extremely slender, as white as snow, without any fat, and were placed around Li Ang's waist. The devil's figure is fully displayed, wearing a purple slit robe, which perfectly outlines the figure, and every move has a natural charm. Li Ang hugged Hancock's waist, put his arms close to his ear, and said with a smile, "You are trying to seduce me." Not at all. Hancock turned his head, shook his black hair, and said with a blushing pretty face. While the two were playing together, time flew by. Chapter 278-Advanced City. NLT, 29 and GT. While the two were playing together, time flew by. This day. In front of the warship, there was a huge dark building. On board. Flying Squirrel stared at the traces of the building's existence, his eyes flickered, and he said in a low voice, "Finally, we have arrived at the advancing city." The building in front is naturally the famous underwater prison, Advance the City. As long as you are imprisoned, there is basically no hope of coming out. Of course. Thinking of this, Flying Squirrel smiled wryly and looked at the room on the other side. Isn't there a man who escaped from the Push City? The Golden Lion disappeared, but Li Ang was still active in the sea. In the beginning, when he learned about Li Ang, it was because the other party escaped from the advancing city, and the waves caused at that time are still vivid in his mind. Go and inform Her Excellency the Empress. Advance to the city, it's here. Flying Squirrel looked at the naval soldier beside him and instructed. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, I have diarrhea, please, find someone else. The Navy soldier's face changed greatly, he was pale and bloodless, and he left while clutching his stomach. See. Flying Squirrel was stunned, his eyes shifted, and he looked at his surrounding subordinates. In an instant, a group of Navy members clutched their stomachs and shouted in unison, Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, I'm going to have diarrhea, it's too painful, I'll retire. In the blink of an eye, the Navy soldiers here disappeared without a trace, not even a single figure could be seen. Flying Squirrel waved his hand helplessly and said, as for what? However, he himself was a little uneasy. In case, if he disturbs the important affairs of the adult, he will be punished to death. Should, probably, not bother them. The Flying Squirrel froze in place, extremely entangled in his heart, thinking. While thinking, he forgot the passage of time. Sudden, the warship was already approaching 300 to the gate of the advanced city. In the room. Through the window, Li Ang and Hancock saw the huge advancing city ahead. This is where you escaped, my lord? Hancock asked with a little curiosity on his pretty face. Yeah, for pirates, it's hell. However, its name does have the word hell in it. Every floor is hell. Li Ang's face was calm, and he smiled lightly. For other pirates, this place may not be worth the aftertaste. But for Li Ang, there is not much difference between this place and other places. He escaped within less than a day of entering the Pushing City, and he did not have a deep understanding of the laws of life in Pushing City. It's almost time for the advanced city. Hancock said with a look of anticipation and curiosity. And that guy? Li Ang's eyes flickered, and the smile on his face did not diminish. He thought of this guy Luffy. In the past few days, the other party has really kept his own feet and didn't cause him any trouble. I have to say, once serious, Luffy is more reliable. Every day, Li Ang will send food over there. Although the food intake is huge, at least it will not arouse the detection of the Navy on the ship. In this way, Xiong'an passed through this period of time without incident, and until he arrived at the advanced city, Luffy didn't lose the chain, which was deeply surprising to Li Ang. Chapter 279-Domino. Since we're in the advanced city, let's go out and enjoy the environment here. Li Ang's face changed and he suggested with a smile. Yeah. Hancock nodded lightly and said. No matter what Li Ang said, she would agree to it immediately. Seeing Hancock's well-behaved appearance, Li Ang couldn't help but smile, rubbed Hancock's delicate and flawless face, and felt the delicate and cold skin, which was very wonderful to touch. Immediately, the two opened the door and walked out of the boat. At this time, the Flying Squirrel was in a tangle, looking at the floor, gritted his teeth, extremely tangled. Is it to remind each other? Still not reminded. What if you provoke the other party? It is precisely because of this matter that he, the dignified Lieutenant General of the Navy headquarters, has been hesitating for no less than half an hour, which is truly unrecognizable. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, hello. Just then, a voice pulled the flying skier back. He raised his head and saw Li Ang and Hancock, who were gradually walking in front of him. Lord Li Ang. The Flying Squirrel exhaled heavily, finally letting out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the other party came out by himself, which saved him from knocking on the door to avoid disturbing the other party. Promote the city, I'm back again. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. Hearing this, Flying Squirrel was in a cold sweat and laughed bitterly. Only Li Ang has the courage to return to Pushing City again, and still maintain such a bland mentality, and even treat Pushing City as a tourist attraction for sightseeing. Open the door. The flying skier took a deep breath, walked to the front, and shouted at the naval soldiers on the city gate. As a lieutenant general of the headquarters, he is still qualified to enter the advanced city. As for why he took Liang to the advanced city without worrying about it, that is because, anyway, he has no way to resist. It is better to be direct. After all, it would be really easy if Liang really wanted to take people away from the advancing city. The three generals can't stop it. So, fortunately, the flying squirrel was not afraid of being scalded by the boiling water, so they put Liang in directly. In any case, Liang wanted to save people, but he couldn't stop him, neither could the advanced city, nor the world government. Go straight and save yourself a lot of trouble. Bang! The gate of the advancing city slowly opened, revealing the dim environment inside. This area of the sea requires a fixed route to sail over. If you just rely on the ocean current, you will definitely not be able to reach the advanced city. The ocean currents are separated from the position of the advancing city and drift to another area. Therefore, without an accurate route, it is impossible to reach the advanced city at all. It's just that Liang didn't remember the route to advance the city. Anyway, he didn't come by boat. He stepped on the moon and crossed it from the air. Lord Liang, please, don't disturb this place after entering. The flying squirrel gritted his teeth, but still reminded. You can rest assured that I will not interfere. I will not interfere with anything here. Unless someone takes the initiative to provoke me, otherwise, I can assure you that I will not do anything. Liang waved his hand and said with a smile on his face. Then I am relieved. The flying squirrel sighed in relief again and nodded. Liang's assurance is still very convincing. Scary characters of this level don't need to lie. As long as Liang doesn't act, everything is easy to talk about. As for anyone who dares to provoke Liang, this is basically impossible for flying squirrels. If Liang does not provoke others, it is already a blessing for others. How could anyone dare to provoke the killing god Liang? It is simply ridiculous. The warship led Liang, Hancock and others, and gradually drove completely into the advanced city. Chapter 279-Domino. NLT, 31 and GT. The warship led Liang, Hancock and others, and gradually drove completely into the advanced city. Soon, the warship arrived at the entrance to the prison. Lord Liang, Your Excellency Hancock, please. The flying squirrel was very complimented and said to Liang and the two. The rest of the navy will stay on the warship, and soon they will go to sea again. This group went to advanced city just because of a small request from Liang. Otherwise, the route of sailing is to go directly to Mary Joa, not to the advanced city. I haven't been back here for a long time. Liang narrowed his eyes slightly, looked at the other direction of the warship calmly, and said. He was thinking about how to put Luffy in the Push City. This is how the story unfolds. Position in front. A woman in uniform came, a pair of long straight legs covered with dark stockings. She was slender, elegant, wearing red-brown glasses. She wears a hat cross-body covering her right eye, has long curly blonde hair, and her left eye is covered by a pair of sunglasses. At the same time, she is wearing a brown jacket and brown shorts, a white shirt, a black tie, dark red high boots and dark red gloves, looks very charming. However, if compared with Hancock next to Liang, she is not so good, but rather mediocre. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel. Domino walked up to the flying squirrel and said respectfully. Let's lead the way and meet Ace. This is the request of this lord. The flying skier nodded and said slowly. A body search is required. Domino glanced at Liang, his pupils shrank, and his voice could not help becoming a little subtle. Liang. This is definitely Liang. It is absolutely impossible for her to admit her mistake. At that time, she participated in the task of searching Liang, but she did not expect that Liang escaped in the end. But now, the other party actually returned to the advanced city, which made her feel very excited. However, the current Liang is no longer the prisoner he once was. Therefore, even those who advance here in the city have no right to arrest Liang. If there is really a big oolong, they can't afford such consequences. Who doesn't know that Liang has already destroyed 2 branch fortresses? In the end, he retreated completely and asked the naval headquarters to order peace, and it was inevitable that the two would continue to fight. Such a terrifying figure, Domino admits that she herself must not be provoked. Lord Liang, everyone who enters the prison must have their bodies searched. Flying Squirrel pondered for a moment, and said slightly suppressed. He was afraid that Liang would not agree, so he directly rushed in. This case, the people who can hold Liang with good money, at present are not advancing the city, then advancing the city will be turned upside down. It doesn't matter. Liang glanced at the lovely and charming girl Domino, nodded and said, "Thank you for your understanding." Domino hurriedly bowed and said, if Liang did not agree, she really did not dare to search Liang. The identity level of the other party is too high. At this time, Liang's eyes were attracted, his eyes narrowed slightly, looking at a figure emerging from the warship, the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. That person, of course, is Luffy. Before stepping off the warship, Liang had already reminded Luffy. Next, let the other party knock out a navy, disguised as a navy, and enter the advanced city. As expected, Luffy quickly wore a navy uniform and walked in front of Liang and Flying Squirrel. Well, what are you doing here? This is not what you can come here, hurry back. Flying Squirrel raised his brows, looked at the navy soldier who suddenly appeared, and ordered. NLT, 32 and GT. Chapter 280 _ Magellan again. I asked him to come. Liang waved his hand to stop Flying Squirrel's words and explained, Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, if you want to come, you remember. I once walked out of the first floor of the Red Lotus Hell, so it is hard to recognize it when it is strong. I haven't seen you for so long, so I asked him to take my place and send some news to those people. I don't know, this request of mine shouldn't be too much, right? After speaking, Liang looked at the Flying Squirrel with a very calm expression. The flying skier did not know that the naval soldier in front of him was disguised. Moreover, he could not have imagined that a pirate appeared on his warship. If it's just Red Lotus Hell, it's not a problem. Flying Squirrel thought for a while, looked at the naval soldier, and ordered, remember, do what Master Liang ordered properly, understand? The navy, namely Luffy, lowered his head even lower. Unprepared, Flying Squirrels were completely unpredictable. In his opinion, this is his subordinate, and he still obeys Liang's orders. Combining these 2 points, there is no factor that makes him suspect. If Liang really wanted to save people, he didn't need to be so troublesome. Flying Squirrel preconceived that Liang would never save any prisoners here. If you really want to save it, you have already done it, so why bother talking too much? Everyone, please do a routine check. Domino looked at Liang, his voice was very subtle. 480. She knows who the person standing in front of her is, and she also knows how terrifying people at this level are. It was because of this that she could not contain the tension in her heart. Please. Liang spread his hands and said with a smile on the corner of his mouth. With white gloves, Domino checked Liang's body. The soft palm made Liang feel a sense of comfort, and he could not help narrowing his eyes slightly, unmoved, and had no intention of resisting. At this time, Domino was quite nervous. He checked Liang from top to bottom. Suddenly, her hands were a little stiff, and her sunglasses-wearing eyes stared blankly at the position of her hands. Like an electric shock, he quickly retracted his hands. His face was a little red, and said, the inspection is over. What's the matter with you? I haven't even spoken yet. Liang looked at Domino meaningfully and said. The rest of the people have no idea what happened between them. Domino's speed was too fast, and no one saw what she had done. Only Liang and Domino both knew. Just now, which AJDG position did Domino check? Pass, pass. Domino blushed, lowered his head, and said. You were responsible. Next, I will come to you. Liang moved his footsteps and passed Domino's side. At the same time, he left some words with a meaningful smile on his face. Immediately, Domino was a little panicked, with a cautious expression, not daring to look at Liang. Soon, Domino's next inspection was a little careless. After Liang's matter, she touched ordinary places such as her arm with basic knowledge, and announced the word passed. Lord Liang, please come here. The flying squirrel also successfully entered the advanced city and said respectfully. Okay, you go. Liang looked at Luffy, who was disguised as a navy, and said lightly. Luffy's footsteps moved, and he was about to leave. At this time, Flying Squirrel raised his brows, looked at Luffy's back, and said, wait a minute. Well. Chapter 280 Meet Magellan again. NLT, 33 and GT. Well. Liang didn't change his face was calm and unmoved. And Luffy's footsteps stopped abruptly. The flying squirrel walked behind Luffy and approached step by step. In the end, he stayed in the area less than 2 meters behind Luffy, and ordered, Lord Liang's words, you must keep in mind that there should be no accidents. Moreover, here, you must also act according to the rules, understand? Luffy turned his back to the flying squirrel, nodded, and did not speak. Okay, let's go. Flying Squirrel waved his hand casually and said. Anyway, he would never think that those who enter here can bring out prisoners. It's easy to get in, but hard to get out of here. This is also the reason why the guards were not so strict when advancing the city into this place. If it is so easy to escape from here, then this place is not worthy of being called an advanced city. In addition to the terrifying existence of Liang, want to escape from the advanced city. Not to mention this soldier, even if it is himself, in the absence of power, it is impossible to escape here simply by force. Only a freak like Liang could leave here easily. Watching Luffy's back disappear gradually, Liang's expression became intriguing, and the corner of his mouth twitched, and said with a smile, Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, let's go. Yeah. Flying Squirrel nodded solemnly, walked ahead, and led Liang to the 6th floor of Infinite Hell. Beside Liang, Hancock's pretty face was calm, without the slightest sense of tension. Instead, he leaned on Liang's side with a slight smile and whispered, this advanced city seems to be quite spectacular. Is it spectacular? The area here is quite vast. You will find that you are not necessarily lost when you are walking. If there is no one to lead it, it is easy to get confused. Liang said with a smile on his face. Lord Liang said very much. Flying Squirrel also turned his head in front of him and agreed. At this time, Liang didn't look forward to seeing Ace after sending Luffy away. However, since they all use this as an excuse, naturally, the excuse must be completed so that it will not be so conspicuous. The 1st floor of the Red Lotus Hell, very smoothly, reached the 2nd floor. The 3rd floor. The 6th layer of Infinite Hell is located in the deepest part of the seabed. Few people know that there is such a layer. Every one of the people detained in it is extremely vicious. On the 5th floor, Liang finally met an old acquaintance, and he was an old acquaintance from a long time ago. Director Magellan. When the Flying Squirrel saw Magellan, he had to say respectfully. Although the official position, the two are not related to each other, there is no comparison. However, in the advanced city, Magellan is the absolute emperor of soil. Except for the warring states marshal, no one could give him orders. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel. Magellan stood on the other side of the passage, his burly body facing the Flying Squirrel, raised his brows, and said in surprise. Immediately, his eyes moved, staring at the figure beside the Flying Squirrel, his pupils shrank, and he blurted out, it's you. Magellan, long time no see. Liang looked at Magellan who was wearing a black uniform in front of him. The familiar figure of the other party was still the same as before, and he smiled lightly. Just as when they first met, neither of them has changed much. However, the change in strength is too great. At the time, Liang barely defeated Magellan in silence. And now, it is no exaggeration to say that Liang can kill Magellan in 10 seconds. Even in such a narrow passage, this can be done without any pressure.